On the night of our 5th anniversary, I stood calmly at the front of the Emerald Room as my sister Olivia rushed toward Daniel, tears streaming down her face. "Tell her the truth," she demanded, gripping his arm. "Tell Rachel that what we have is real." The room fell silent. 200 guests froze mid-conversation, champagne glasses suspended in air. Daniel looked at me with panic in his eyes, clearly expecting me to crumble. Instead, I smiled. "Actually," I said, my voice steady as I reached for my leather portfolio, "I've been waiting for this moment." I pulled out the first photograph and held it up for everyone to see. "These are copies of letters I found 6 months ago. Letters my husband wrote to my sister. But that's not the most interesting part." I watched Olivia's triumphant expression dissolve into confusion as I began revealing what I'd discovered. By the time I finished, it wasn't just my marriage that would never be the same. It was something much bigger than any of us had imagined. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up with Olivia Carter wasn't just challenging, it was a masterclass in vigilance. 4 years younger than me, she entered the world with a gravitational pull that bent everyone around her to her will. Our mother, Patricia, called it charisma. I called it something else entirely. It started with small things. Borrowing my favorite books only to return them water-damaged, or accidentally spilling juice on my school projects the night before they were due. As we grew older, the pattern evolved into something more deliberate. In high school, while I worked double shifts at the local cafe to save for my first camera, Olivia began dating my photography mentor, causing him to abruptly end our sessions. In college, she applied to the same internships, always managing to charm her way into positions I'd spent months preparing for. "It's not personal, Rach," she'd say with a shrug. "We just happen to like the same things." But everything changed. The night I met Daniel Wilson at a charity art exhibition in downtown Portland. I was photographing the event. He was presenting his architectural firm's proposal for the city's new community arts center. Olivia had canceled last minute, a migraine, she claimed, something I'd later recognize as a stroke of rare fortune. When Daniel approached me to ask about my unconventional camera angles, the conversation flowed effortlessly from professional admiration to personal connection. By the end of the evening, we'd exchanged numbers and a promise to meet for coffee the following week. 3 months into our relationship, I introduced Daniel to my family. Something shifted in Olivia's expression when they shook hands, a flash of calculation I recognized all too well. But for once, her tactics didn't work. Daniel remained steadfastly devoted to me, proposing 6 months later during a sunrise shoot at Cannon Beach. For the first time in my life, I had found something Olivia couldn't take. Or so I thought. The vintage wooden box appeared innocently enough. I was reorganizing Daniel's home office while he was at a 3-day conference in Chicago, hoping to surprise him with the space he'd been too busy to manage himself. Tucked behind architecture journals and buried under draft papers, the unassuming cedar box seemed out of place among his minimalist belongings. Inside, carefully arranged and dated, lay 15 handwritten letters spanning 8 months, the first dated just 2 weeks after our engagement. "Daniel, I can't stop thinking about our conversation at the engagement dinner. When you asked about the vintage camera techniques Rachel uses, I saw something in your eyes that wasn't just professional curiosity. Tell me I'm not imagining this connection between us." Olivia. My hands trembled as I continued reading. Letter. After letter documenting clandestine meetings, shared secrets, and growing intimacy, Daniel's responses weren't included. But Olivia's words painted a clear picture of reciprocation. "Your message yesterday meant everything. I understand the complicated position you're in. Rachel has always had what I wanted, but this is different. This isn't about rivalry. What we have is real." I sat there for hours, the afternoon light fading to dusk, then darkness. I didn't cry. I didn't call him in a rage. Instead, I carefully photographed each letter, returned them exactly as I'd found them, and closed the box. Then I called Megan. "Don't confront them yet," my best friend advised as we sat in the back corner of Evergreen Brews the next morning. "You need to understand the full picture before you make any moves." "The full picture is pretty clear," I said, sliding my phone across the table to show her the photographed evidence. Megan studied the images, her brow furrowed. "These are Olivia's letters, but where are Daniel's responses, and why would he keep these in your shared home if he was trying to hide an affair?" That question lodged in my mind, refusing to dislodge. It didn't fit Daniel's methodical personality to be so careless, especially when his architectural designs were known for their meticulous attention to detail. "Start observing," Megan suggested. "Watch their interactions, monitor your calls, keep copies of everything. If you're going to confront this, you need to do it from a position of complete information." I nodded, a plan already forming. As a photographer, I understood better than most that what matters isn't just what's in the frame, it's also what's deliberately left out. For the next month, I became an investigator in my own life. I noted every time Daniel mentioned being delayed at work, cross-referencing with Olivia's sudden unavailability for family dinners. I documented their interactions at gatherings, catching the brief touches, the meaningful glances. But I also noticed inconsistencies. Sometimes Daniel seemed genuinely surprised when Olivia showed up unexpectedly. He'd reference conversations with her that didn't align with the narrative in the letters. And Olivia was playing a familiar role, but something felt rehearsed. The breakthrough came when I found the second box. While Daniel was showering one evening, a text notification lit up his phone on the nightstand. I'd never been the type to snoop, but the sender's name caught my eye. "Jason, Olivia Project." The message preview read, "Updated the timeline. Still think Rachel deserves to know before..." That night, after Daniel fell asleep, I slipped into his car and checked. The compartment beneath the driver's seat, his hiding place for surprise gifts in the past. There I found another wooden box, identical to the first but unlocked. Inside weren't letters, but a leather-bound journal and a USB drive. I took them to my home studio and began reading. Project documentation. Timeline of Olivia's patterns. Compiled by Daniel Wilson and Jason Reed. Entry 1. 3 weeks after engagement to Rachel. Olivia initiated first unusual contact, requesting private meeting to discuss surprise for Rachel. During meeting, attempted physical contact 3x, mentioned Rachel's inability to understand real connection 2x. Action taken, documented conversation, informed Jason of concerns. What unfolded in those pages wasn't a record of an affair, it was evidence of an investigation. Daniel, with Jason's help, had been documenting Olivia's increasingly inappropriate behavior since our engagement. The USB drive contained recordings of conversations, screenshots of messages, and a detailed analysis of what they called the pattern. The final page hit me like a physical blow. Daniel. We now have sufficient evidence of Olivia's attempts to manipulate the situation. The question becomes, do we tell Rachel now, risking her relationship with her sister, or wait until after Olivia makes a more public move, which seems increasingly likely? Either way, this ends badly for someone. I'm worried about Rachel either. Where's and I sat frozen in my studio until sunrise, the implications washing over me in waves. Daniel hadn't betrayed me. He'd been trying to protect me while gathering evidence of my sister's behavior. But why keep it secret? Why not tell me from the beginning? The answer came when I reviewed the earliest entries. Daniel had initially tried to dismiss Olivia's advances as misunderstandings, not wanting to come between sisters. It was only when her behavior escalated that he began the systematic documentation, by which point he worried that without concrete proof, I might not believe him. or worse, might blame him for encouraging her somehow. I faced a choice: confront them both immediately or develop my own counter-strategy. As morning light filtered through my studio windows, I made my decision. If Daniel could document a pattern, I could document its resolution. Opening my laptop, I began planning our upcoming anniversary party, the perfect stage for the truth, to emerge on my terms. The next 6 weeks passed in a carefully choreographed dance. I maintained normal routines with Daniel, fighting the urge to reveal what I knew. I increased contact with Olivia, subtly dropping hints about concerns in my marriage, creating openings she eagerly exploited. Daniel seems distracted lately, I mentioned during our monthly lunch. Sometimes I wonder if he's really happy. Olivia's expression flickered between concern and opportunity. Marriage is hard, she offered, reaching for my hand. But you can talk to me about anything, Rach. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That's what sisters are for. Meanwhile, I met secretly with Jason, confirming my discoveries and combining our evidence. We developed a strategy that would expose the truth while minimizing public damage, or so we thought. What we couldn't anticipate was Olivia's accelerated timeline or the dramatic form her final move would take. The night of our anniversary party at the Emerald Room, everything was arranged precisely, from the guest list, carefully curated to include key witnesses from throughout our lives, to the multimedia presentation I'd prepared to share at 9:30 p.m. But at 8:47, before I could initiate our planned revelation, Olivia created her own moment. Dressed in a stunning green gown that echoed mine too closely to be coincidental, she clinked her glass for attention. "I'd like to make a toast," she announced, her voice carrying across the room. "To Rachel and Daniel," she faltered, tears welling in her eyes. The performance was flawless. "I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore." That's when she rushed toward Daniel, grabbing his arm and demanding he tell the truth about their relationship. The room fell silent. Daniel looked at me, panic and regret mingling in his expression. He opened his mouth to speak, but I stepped forward first. "Actually," I said calmly, "I've been waiting for this moment." I nodded to Jason, who activated the presentation I'd prepared. "These are copies of letters I found 6 months ago. Letters my sister wrote to my husband." I walked toward the screen as the first image appeared, Olivia's initial letter, enlarged for all to see. What most of you don't know is that this isn't an isolated incident. My sister has spent years attempting to appropriate pieces of my life. I advanced to the next slide, a split-screen comparison of Olivia's behavior documented over time. But the truly interesting part isn't the letters themselves. I turned to face Olivia directly. "It's that Daniel never responded the way you wanted him to." The color drained from her face as the presentation continued, revealing Daniel and Jason's documentation project. Gasps echoed through the room as the extent of her manipulation became clear. "Daniel kept your letters," I continued. "Not as mementos of an affair, but as evidence of a pattern he was trying to understand and ultimately protect me from." Mother stood up, moving toward Olivia with a stricken expression. "Is this true?" Olivia's carefully constructed facade cracked. "You don't understand," she whispered, looking not at our mother, but at me. "It was never about Daniel, not really." "I know," I replied, advancing to the final slide, a childhood photo of us standing before our father's photography display, my proud smile contrasting with Olivia's envious glance. "It was always about what you thought I had that you deserved." What happened next surprised everyone, myself included. Instead of fleeing in humiliation or lashing out in denial, Olivia simply sat down, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "I couldn't." "Stop," she said, her voice barely audible. "Ever since Dad left and chose to send you, not me, that stupid vintage camera for your 13th birthday, It was like he decided which daughter mattered. The revelation hung in the air, recontextualizing 2 decades of rivalry into something more complex and painful than simple jealousy. I hadn't planned for this vulnerability, this sudden glimpse into the wounded core of our relationship. My carefully orchestrated exposure was supposed to end with justice, not understanding. After a moment of weighted silence, I turned to our guests. "I think my sister and I need some privacy. Thank you all for coming, but the celebration is over." As the room cleared, Daniel approached me, his expression a mixture of relief and apprehension. "I should have told you from the beginning," he said. "I was trying to protect you from exactly this pain." "I know," I replied, squeezing his hand. "We'll talk later. Right now, there's something more important." I sat down across from Olivia, who hadn't moved or looked up since her confession. For the first time in our adult lives, the familiar script of competition and resentment had been abandoned, leaving us in uncharted territory. "Tell me about the camera," I said quietly. "Tell me what it really meant to you." And as the staff cleared plates around us in the emptying restaurant, my sister finally shared her unfiltered truth, not the version designed to manipulate or compete, but the raw, unvarnished story of a younger sister who had always felt overlooked. The confrontation at the Emerald Room became a turning point, though not in the way anyone expected. Instead of a final severing of sisterhood, it marked the beginning of a difficult, halting attempt at authentic connection. Olivia moved to Seattle 3 weeks later, accepting a job offer she'd previously declined because it would have taken her away from Portland, away from my life, which she'd been so focused on shadowing. The physical distance created space for both of us to begin healing separately. Our mother, shocked by the revelation of decades-long rivalry she'd failed to address, began therapy to examine her role in our damaged relationship. "I thought your competitiveness was normal sibling stuff," she admitted during a difficult Sunday brunch. "I never saw how deep it went." Daniel and I faced our own reckoning. "I thought I was protecting you," he explained during a long walk along the waterfront. "But I was making decisions about your family without including you. And I investigated you without trusting you enough to ask directly," I acknowledged. "We both need to do better." Slowly, we rebuilt trust, not by ignoring what had happened, but by using it as a foundation for more honest communication. The wooden boxes containing Olivia's letters and Daniel's documentation were stored away, not forgotten, but no longer defining our present. 6 months after the confrontation, I received an unexpected package from Seattle. Inside was a journal, not filled with manipulative fantasies, but with painful self-reflection. Olivia had begun therapy, confronting the roots of her competitive obsession. "I've been thinking about what you said at the party," she wrote. "About it never really being about Daniel. You were right. It was about becoming you, because I couldn't figure out how to become me." Attached was a business card for her new venture, Original Perspective Events, with the tagline, "Creating authentic celebrations tailored to your unique story." "I'm finally building something that's mine," her note concluded. "Not a copy of your life, but something that uses my actual strengths." I called her that evening, our first direct conversation since the confrontation. The awkwardness gradually gave way to cautious honesty as she described her therapy journey and new business challenges. "The hardest part," she admitted, "is catching myself when I start comparing my progress to yours. It's like breaking an addiction." "I understand addiction to old patterns," I replied, sharing my own struggles with lingering distrust and vigilance. That call became a monthly tradition, difficult at first, then increasingly natural as we learned to relate as separate individuals rather than competitive reflections. 1 year after the confrontation, a more unexpected development emerged. While reviewing client photographs for an exhibition, I noticed something striking. The subjects who revealed vulnerability rather than perfection created the most powerful images. This observation sparked an idea that eventually became healing. Lens, a therapeutic photography workshop helping people document their personal transformations. The first clients were individuals recovering from relationship betrayals, using photography to reclaim their narratives. When Olivia called to congratulate me on the launch, she hesitantly offered a suggestion. Have you considered partnering with event planners, creating milestone celebrations to mark people's healing journeys? Instead of my usual suspicion of her involvement in my projects, I heard the idea with fresh ears. That's actually brilliant. Would your company be interested in a Seattle collaboration? The partnership that developed wasn't just professionally successful. It became a structured way for us to rebuild sisterhood through shared purpose rather than shared history. 2 years after finding the wooden box, I stood in a Seattle gallery, surrounded by photographs documenting transformation stories, including, with her permission, parts of Olivia's journey from imitation to authenticity. What surprised me most, a visitor commented, studying a particularly powerful before and after series, is how the subject looks more herself in the after images, not less. Usually people try to become someone new during healing. The goal isn't becoming someone new, I explained. It's becoming who you actually are beneath the protective layers. Across the room, Olivia was describing our collaborative approach to another group. Watching her confident gestures and genuine enthusiasm, I barely recognized the sister who had once seemed to exist only in reference to me. Daniel squeezed my hand. This isn't how I expected things to unfold when I started documenting her behavior, he admitted quietly. I thought I was gathering evidence for an inevitable confrontation. I never imagined this. This was something neither of us could have predicted, a healing process that extended far beyond our immediate family. The workshop model expanded to 3 additional cities, helping hundreds document their journeys from imitation to authenticity. Mother, who had initially been devastated by the revelation of Olivia's decades-long envy, found unexpected purpose becoming an advocate for more conscious parenting. I missed so many signs, she often said during her community workshops, but awareness is the first step toward change. 3 years after the anniversary party confrontation, I received another package from Olivia. Inside was a custom-designed photo album titled Original Perspectives. The first pages contained childhood photos of us, unaltered but thoughtfully captioned with new understanding. Here's where it started, she wrote beneath the image of my father's camera gift. I thought Dad was choosing you, but really, he was just seeing you clearly while missing who I actually was. The middle section documented our parallel professional journeys, my photography studio and her event planning business, no longer presented as competition, but as distinct expressions of different talents. The final pages showed something entirely new, collaborative projects where our separate strengths created something neither could have built alone. I spent so many years trying to steal pieces of your life, her accompanying note read. Now I'm finally living my own, and it's better than any imitation could have been. The album's last page held a formal invitation to the opening of Authentic Image, a permanent gallery space in Portland dedicated to transformation photography, with Olivia's company managing events in the attached celebration venue. Partner, not competitor, she'd written. Sister, not shadow. 4 years after discovering the wooden box of letters, I stood with Daniel at the gallery opening, watching Olivia confidently guide visitors through the space she had helped design. No longer dressed to mimic me, her distinctive style reflected her emerging identity. Sometimes I still get nervous when she and I have similar ideas, I admitted to Daniel. Old habits die hard. The difference is that now you talk about it directly, he replied. Both of you do. Jason approached with champagne flutes and a grin. Remember when we thought this would end with restraining orders? Now look at this place. The most powerful exhibits are the ones showing incomplete journeys, one visitor commented, studying a wall dedicated to in-progress transformations. It's inspiring to see people in the middle of becoming, not just after they've arrived. That's intentional, Olivia explained, joining our conversation. Healing isn't a before and after story, it's ongoing. Later that evening, when most guests had departed, Olivia and I found ourselves alone in the gallery office. The awkwardness that had characterized our early reconciliation attempts had gradually transformed into something more authentic. Not effortless closeness, but honest navigation of complex history. "I brought something," she said, placing a small wooden box on the desk between us. My breath caught, recognizing it as identical to the one that had contained her letters to Daniel. "It's empty," she explained, opening it to show me. A symbol. "I'm not collecting pieces of your life anymore. I'm building my own." I reached into my camera bag and withdrew a photographed image, the childhood picture of us with my father's camera, the one that had appeared in my anniversary presentation, and again in her album. "I had it restored," I said, handing her the print. The original negative showed something the faded version didn't. In the restored image, our father's proud expression wasn't directed solely at me as we'd both always remembered. His gaze encompassed both daughters equally, one hand on each of our shoulders. "We both filled in the blanks with our own fears," I said quietly. "You saw exclusion where there might have been simple connection." Olivia studied the image, tears gathering. "And you saw specialness where there might have been ordinary love. We both created stories that shaped everything that followed." We sat in silence, contemplating how a single moment, a father's gift, a misinterpreted glance, had launched decades of competition and pain, culminating in stolen letters and public confrontation. "If I hadn't found those letters," I said finally, "where do you think we'd be now?" Olivia considered the question carefully. "Still trapped," she answered. "Me and my obsession with becoming you. You and your vigilance against losing to me. Neither of us actually living." I placed the photograph in the empty wooden box, a new association for an object that had once contained attempts at identity theft. "To filling our own boxes," I said, closing the lid, "with our own stories." 5 years after the night that could have destroyed us, the Healing Lens approach had spread to healing centers across the country. Daniel and I had welcomed our first child, a daughter whose naming celebration Olivia organized with genuine joy rather than envy. My sister's evolution from shadow to self continued through ongoing therapy and creative expression. Her event planning business specialized in authenticity celebrations, helping people mark meaningful personal transformations. At a special exhibition commemorating the 5th anniversary of our collaborative work, a journalist asked about the origins of the therapy through photography concept. "It began with letters," I explained, while Olivia nodded encouragement. "Letters that could have ended relationships, but instead began something new." "The exhibit documents so many different transformations," the journalist observed. "Which was the most difficult?" Olivia and I exchanged glances, a world of understanding passing between us. "Learning to see yourself clearly," we answered simultaneously, instead of through someone else's eyes. As visitors moved through the gallery spaces, they passed beneath a sign that had become our shared philosophy. "The most powerful story is not the one you copy, but the one you create." And in a quiet corner, placed without explanation, sat an empty wooden box, a reminder that our most valuable possessions are not the parts of others we try to claim, but the authentic selves we finally allow to emerge. The day after discovering the wooden box, I walked through my photography studio with unseeing eyes. The walls lined with my award-winning portraits seemed to belong to someone else's life. Clients called. I rescheduled them. Friends texted. I sent brief, non-committal replies. Everything had narrowed to a single focal point. The image of those letters, carefully preserved in my husband's office. I'd spent the night in my studio downtown, unable to face Daniel when he returned from his conference. How could I look at him without revealing what I knew? How could I share a bed with a man who might be in love with my sister? The questions circled like vultures, picking at my certainty and confidence until nothing remained but raw, exposed doubt. Morning light filtered through the industrial windows of Captured Moments photography, illuminating dust motes that danced in the emptiness. I hadn't slept. The images from those letters kept replaying. Olivia's elegant handwriting detailing intimate moments, secret meetings, and emotional connections that had supposedly developed right under my nose. My phone buzzed. Daniel, for the 4th time since dawn. Rachel, please call me. I'm worried. The house feels empty without you. If you're caught up with work, just let me know you're okay. His voice sounded genuinely concerned. Was it possible to fake that tone? To live a double life so convincingly? The Daniel I knew was straightforward, honest to a fault. The Daniel who would keep my sister's love letters hidden in our home was a stranger. When the studio door chimed, I didn't look up, assuming it was my assistant arriving for the day. Instead, Megan's voice cut through my haze. "You look like hell," she said, placing a large coffee on my desk. "Which means something's wrong, because you never look like hell." The concern in her eyes broke something in me. I silently handed her my phone, open to the photos I'd taken of the letters. She read them slowly, her expression shifting from confusion to anger. "That manipulative little..." She caught herself. "Wait, this doesn't make sense. Daniel adores you. I've never seen him so much as glance at Olivia. And why would he keep these?" "I don't know," I admitted. The first words I'd spoken aloud since the discovery. "I don't know anything anymore." Megan settled across from me, her PR specialist, mind visibly processing scenarios. "Okay, let's think logically. There are several possibilities here. 1. Daniel's having an affair with Olivia, and he's careless enough to keep evidence in your shared home." I winced. 2. Olivia's pursuing Daniel, but he's not reciprocating, and he kept the letters as evidence. 3. Something else entirely is happening that we don't yet understand. "The letters span 8 months," I said quietly. "The most recent was dated just 2 weeks ago." Megan studied me carefully. "What does your instinct tell you?" "That's the problem," I replied, running my hands through my unwashed hair. "My instinct says Daniel wouldn't do this, but my experience says Olivia absolutely would." "Then that's where we start," Megan decided. "We need more information before you confront either of them. You're a photographer, Rachel. You know better than anyone that what's excluded from the frame is often as important as what's included." She was right. In my work, context determined meaning. A smile could be genuine joy or masked pain depending on the setting, the lighting, the subtle cues surrounding it. I needed the full picture. "What's your plan?" I asked, feeling the first stirrings of purpose replacing the numb shock. "First, you go home and act normal," Megan said. "Be the Rachel that Daniel expects. Professional, observant, calm. Watch how he interacts with you. Look for inconsistencies, not confirmation. And Olivia? Increase contact, but change nothing else. If she's pursuing your husband, let her think she's succeeding. People reveal more when they believe they're winning." The strategy felt both logical and deeply wrong, pretending normalcy while secretly investigating the 2 people closest to me. But what alternative did I have? A confrontation based on incomplete information could destroy everything, including my own certainty about what had actually happened. "I need rules," I said finally. "Parameters, timeline. Otherwise, this will consume me." Megan nodded. 1 month of observation. Document everything, just like you would for a photo essay. Then we reassess with whatever new information you've gathered." I took a deep breath, feeling my professional instincts engage. 1 month to find the truth. Then I decide what happens next. Returning home that evening required every ounce of self-control I possessed. I'd showered at the studio, applied makeup to hide my sleepless night, and prepared answers for the inevitable questions about my absence. Daniel was in the kitchen when I arrived, his relief at seeing me evident in the way his shoulders relaxed. "Rachel," he breathed, moving toward me. "I was worried. You didn't come home last night." I allowed him to embrace me, noting the genuine concern in his voice, the familiar scent of his cologne, the strength of his arms around me. Nothing felt different. Nothing felt like a man torn between two women or harboring a devastating secret. "Emergency editing session for the Thompson wedding," I lied smoothly. "Their anniversary announcement is this weekend, and the lighting was all wrong in the first batch." I crashed on the studio couch. He pulled back, studying my face. "You should have called. I would have brought you food, clean clothes, anything you needed." The sincerity in his eyes nearly broke my resolve. This was the Daniel I knew. Thoughtful, devoted, present. How could this same man be exchanging intimate letters with my sister? "It was a blur," I said, summoning a tired smile. "But I'm home now. How was Chicago?" As he described his conference, I watched him carefully, the way his hands moved when explaining architectural concepts, the genuine excitement about sustainable design innovations, the occasional self-deprecating laugh when mentioning networking awkwardness. Nothing seemed performative or false. "Oh," he added, reaching for his phone. "Your sister called while you were out. Something about helping with her Hayes Corporation event next month. She said it's urgent." My heart stuttered. The casualness with which he mentioned Olivia seemed impossibly normal. I forced my voice to remain steady. "Did she? I'll call her tomorrow." That night, lying beside Daniel in our bed, listening to his steady breathing, I stared at the ceiling and calculated. The most recent letter was dated just 14 days ago. If their connection was as passionate as Olivia's words suggested, surely there would be contact, plans, something I could intercept to understand the full situation. The next morning, I initiated my surveillance with methodical precision. I created a digital journal to document observations, set up discrete notifications for Daniel's texts and emails, using our shared family account settings he'd long forgotten about, and reached out to Olivia with deliberate warmth. I heard, "You called about the Hayes event," I said when she answered. "Tell me what you need." "Rachel?" "Yes. They've requested both photography and event coordination for their corporate anniversary. I immediately thought of you for the visual documentation." Her voice carried the same affectionate enthusiasm it always did. No hint of guilt, no subtle differences in how she addressed me. "That sounds perfect," I replied, listening carefully for any subtext. "Should we meet to discuss the concept?" "Absolutely. Coffee this Friday? Evergreen Brews at 10? I agreed, noting how easily she suggested our regular spot, not somewhere private or secretive as I might expect if she were involved with my husband. Another incongruity to add to my growing list. The first week of observation yielded frustratingly little. Daniel's schedule matched his calendar precisely. His texts were mundane, exchanges with colleagues about projects, messages to me about dinner plans or household matters. Nothing deleted, nothing suspicious. Olivia's behavior, too, seemed entirely professional during our coffee meeting. She discussed the Hayes event with her usual organizational flair, referencing Daniel only once when mentioning the venue layout. Daniel did such amazing work on their headquarters renovation last year. They still rave about his attention to detail. The casual compliment could have been innocent professional acknowledgement or subtle reference to their connection. Impossible to determine from her tone alone. By the second week, my hypervigilance began revealing patterns, though not the ones I'd expected. Daniel often worked late on Thursdays, the same evening Olivia typically scheduled client dinners, but their locations never overlapped, based on the GPS data I'd begun monitoring through our shared location services. More puzzling still was Daniel's frequent communication with his business partner, Jason. They exchanged dozens of messages daily, many containing cryptic references to the situation and documentation updates. Was Jason covering for Daniel's indiscretions? Or was something else entirely happening beneath the surface? The breakthrough came during week 3, when Daniel left his laptop open while taking a shower. Against my own ethical boundaries, but driven by the need to know, I quickly checked his search history. What I found wasn't evidence of an affair, but something equally concerning. How to document harassment without legal consequences. Protecting spouse from family conflict evidence. When to reveal manipulative behavior patterns. Immediately, following these searches were visits to psychology websites discussing personality disorders, manipulation tactics, and protective documentation strategies. I closed the laptop before Daniel returned, my mind racing. These searches suggested something entirely different from an affair. They painted a picture of someone gathering evidence, preparing for some kind of confrontation. But about what? And against whom? That same evening, Olivia called to cancel our planning meeting for the Hayes event, citing a client emergency. 10 minutes later, Daniel received a text that made his expression darken momentarily. "Everything okay?" I asked, maintaining my practiced casualness. "Just work stress," he replied, but the tightness around his eyes told a different story. I noted the time and watched as he excused himself to make a call from our home office, the same room where I'd found the wooden box, though I couldn't hear the conversation. His tone carried tension that had been absent in our interactions. When he emerged 30 minutes later, he suggested we take a weekend trip to Cannon Beach, our special place where he'd proposed. "We need some time away from everything," he said, "just the two of us reconnecting." Something in his phrasing caught my attention. Reconnecting. As if he sensed distance between us. Distance I had been carefully hiding during my investigation. Had I not been as convincing as I thought? Or was he feeling guilty about something and seeking reassurance? I agreed to the trip, seeing it as an opportunity to observe him away from daily distractions. Perhaps in a more intimate setting, the truth would reveal itself. At Cannon Beach, Daniel was attentive, loving, seemingly completely present. We walked the shoreline at dawn, photographed the iconic Haystack Rock in changing light, and shared meals overlooking the Pacific. In quiet moments, I searched his face for signs of deception, but found only the man I had married. Thoughtful, slightly reserved, occasionally lost in architectural observations about the beachfront properties. On our final evening, sitting before the fireplace in our rental cottage, Daniel took my hand in a gesture so familiar it ached. "Rachel," he began, his voice carrying an unusual hesitation. "Are we okay? You've seemed distant lately. Like you're looking at me through your camera lens instead of just seeing me." The accuracy of his perception startled me. I had been treating him like a subject to document rather than my partner. How much else had he noticed? "I've been preoccupied with work," I deflected. "The Hayes project with Olivia is more complicated than usual." At my sister's name, something flickered across his expression. Concern, not desire. Not the reaction of a man involved in an affair. "How is Olivia?" he asked carefully. "Still having trouble with that client she mentioned?" "What client?" I asked, genuinely confused. Daniel hesitated. "She mentioned having issues with someone making inappropriate demands. I assumed she'd discussed it with you." "Another piece?" That didn't fit. Olivia hadn't mentioned any difficult clients to me. In fact, she'd been unusually positive about her business recently, emphasizing how well everything was going. "She hasn't said anything," I replied truthfully. "We've only discussed the Hayes event." Daniel nodded, a strange resignation in his gesture. Sisters don't always share everything, I guess. The comment hung between us, laden with significance I couldn't fully decipher. Was it an innocent observation or a hint at deeper knowledge of how Olivia and I communicated? That night, I lay awake beside him, recalibrating my understanding of the situation. The evidence suggested something more complex than a simple affair. Daniel's searches, his careful questions, even his suggestion for this getaway, all pointed to someone gathering information, assessing a situation, perhaps even protecting something or someone. But from what? And why the secrecy? By the time we returned to Portland, my suspicion had shifted from Daniel to the larger situation. Something was happening beneath the surface of our lives. Something involving Daniel, Olivia, and possibly others. The letters remained the central puzzle piece, but their meaning had become less clear the more context I gathered. The following Thursday, typically Daniel's late work night, I decided to change my approach. Instead of monitoring from a distance, I would follow him directly. The decision crossed another ethical line, but after 3 weeks of inconclusive evidence, I needed something concrete. I told my assistant I'd be unavailable that evening and positioned myself in a coffee shop across from Daniel's architectural firm. At 6:30, he emerged with Jason, both looking serious as they walked not toward a restaurant or hotel, but toward Jason's apartment building several blocks away. Maintaining a cautious distance, I followed them into the building's lobby, then waited 5 minutes before checking the directory. Jason lived on the 8th floor. I took the elevator up, unsure what I would do when I arrived, but driven by the need to understand. The hallway was silent as I approached apartment 804. Standing outside, I could hear muffled voices but couldn't distinguish words. I stood frozen, reality crashing around me. I was spying on my husband, lurking outside his colleague's apartment, violating every trust we'd built. What had I become in pursuit of this truth? As I turned to leave, the door suddenly opened. Jason stood there, surprise registering on his face. "Rachel? What are you—" He stopped, comprehension dawning. "You—" "No." Daniel appeared behind him, his expression shifting from shock to resignation. "How long have you known?" "About the letters?" I asked, my voice barely audible. 3 weeks. Daniel exchanged a look with Jason that contained volumes of unspoken communication. Then he gently pulled me into the apartment, closing the door behind us. What I saw inside wasn't evidence of betrayal, but of investigation. The living room had been transformed into something resembling a detective's workspace, a timeline pinned to one wall, documenting dates and incidents, printouts of text messages and emails organized chronologically, and at the center, photographs of Olivia at various events we'd all attended together, her expressions and positioning carefully highlighted with analytical notes. "What is this?" I whispered, though the answer was becoming horrifyingly clear. Daniel guided me to the couch, his hand steady on mine. "I need to show you something that will be painful to see. But you need the complete picture now." Jason handed him a laptop, already open to a video file. Daniel pressed play, and I watched as Olivia appeared on screen, seated in what appeared to be a hotel lobby, speaking intently to Daniel. "She doesn't deserve your talent, your connections," my sister was saying, her hand resting on Daniel's, arm with familiar intimacy. "Rachel's always been content with good enough. You need someone who understands your ambition, your vision." Daniel's response was professional but firm. "Olivia, I'm here to discuss the charity gala venue, nothing else. Rachel is my wife, and I'd appreciate it if you respected that boundary." The video continued, showing Olivia's repeated attempts to create a personal connection, each deflected by Daniel with increasing discomfort. The timestamp showed this had occurred just 2 months after our wedding. "This was the first documented incident," Daniel explained quietly. I thought it was a misunderstanding, that she was just being overly friendly. I didn't want to come between you and your sister over what might have been nothing. Jason leaned forward. But then it kept happening. Olivia finding reasons to schedule private meetings, showing up at his office unannounced, calling with emergencies that somehow required immediate, in-person assistance. After the third incident, I told Jason what was happening, Daniel continued. I was worried about how to handle it without hurting you. He suggested documenting everything, just in case. In case of what? I asked, though I already knew the answer. In case she escalated, Jason replied. In case she tried to create a situation that would damage your marriage. Daniel pulled out the wooden box I discovered in his office. The letters started arriving about 6 months ago. Never mailed. She would deliver them personally, slipping them to me at events or leaving them with my assistant. I kept them all, adding them to our documentation. But why not tell me? I asked, the hurt in my voice unmistakable. Why let me believe everything was normal? Daniel's expression conveyed a mixture of regret and determination. At first, I thought I could handle it quietly. Olivia is your only close family besides your mother. I didn't want to be the reason you lost that relationship. Then, as her behavior became more concerning, I worried you wouldn't believe me without proof, he admitted. She's your sister. You've always defended her, explained away her. Competitiveness. I needed irrefutable evidence before asking you to see a different side of someone you love. Jason nodded. The plan was to gather enough documentation to approach you together, present everything systematically, and help you understand the pattern before any confrontation with Olivia occurred. I sat in stunned silence, absorbing what they'd shown me. The letters I'd found weren't evidence of my husband's betrayal. They were evidence of my sister's. And Daniel had been protecting me, albeit in a misguided way, from a painful truth about someone I loved. There's more, Daniel said gently, opening a folder on the laptop. What followed was an extensive catalog of Olivia's attempts to insert herself into our lives, strategic appearances at Daniel's professional events, manipulative conversations with our mutual friends, suggesting concern about our marriage, and, most recently, a systematic campaign to secure her position as the event planner for the Hayes Corporation project, specifically to work closely with me during a period when she knew Daniel and I were planning our 5th anniversary celebration. The Hayes event is scheduled for the same weekend as your anniversary, Jason pointed out. She's been maneuvering to ensure you'd be working while Daniel was supposedly free. We believe she's planning something significant around that time. The realization hit me with physical force. I'd been investigating the wrong person entirely. While I watched Daniel for signs of betrayal, Olivia had been systematically laying groundwork to create opportunity. Opportunity that would have remained invisible to me had I not discovered those letters. What were you planning to do? I asked finally. Once you had enough evidence? Daniel and Jason exchanged glances. We were still deciding, Daniel admitted. Confronting her directly seemed risky without your involvement. But allowing her to continue was becoming increasingly difficult to manage. The letters were getting more explicit, the encounters more frequent. She's escalating, Jason added. Something's driving an accelerated timeline on her part. We've been trying to understand what changed. I thought about Olivia's recent behavior, her increased contact, her unusual interest in my schedule, her casual questions about my marriage. All of it took on new meaning in light of what I now knew. Our anniversary party, I said slowly, the pieces clicking into place. She knows we're planning something special for our 5th. That's her deadline. Daniel nodded. We think so, but we don't know what she's planning. I stood up, pacing Jason's living room as I processed everything. The wooden box of letters, Daniel's secretive behavior, the late Thursday meetings, all of it recontextualized from betrayal to protection. My husband hadn't been having an affair with my sister. He'd been documenting her inappropriate pursuit while trying to shield me from the painful truth. But his protection had also kept me vulnerable, unaware of the manipulation happening around me. And now, with our anniversary just 2 weeks away, Olivia was apparently planning something that would impact our celebration and possibly our marriage. "We need to tell her we know," I said decisively. "Stop this before it goes any further." "That's one option," Jason acknowledged. "But there's another approach to consider." Daniel looked up, understanding in his eyes. "Let her proceed with whatever she's planning, but be prepared. Document the culmination of her pattern," Jason elaborated. "Create a controlled environment where her behavior is revealed not just to you, but to others who need to understand what's been happening." "You mean set a trap," I translated. "I mean create accountability," Jason corrected. "Right now, this is still something she could dismiss as misinterpretation if confronted privately. But if her actions were witnessed by others, she couldn't rewrite the narrative," I finished. Photographers' instinct understanding the power of irrefutable visual evidence. A plan began forming in my mind, not one driven by revenge or hurt, but by the need for truth and resolution. If Olivia was indeed planning something for our anniversary, we could prepare a response that would bring this pattern into the light once and for all. "We need to understand exactly what she's planning," I said, professional focus replacing emotional reaction. "That means I need to get closer, not create distance." Daniel looked concerned. "Are you sure? Engaging more closely means exposing yourself to whatever manipulation she's attempting." "I'm sure," I replied, a calm certainty replacing the chaos of recent weeks. "I've spent my career capturing decisive moments, the split second when truth reveals itself. This is no different." Jason began clearing space on his evidence wall. "If we're going to do this, we need a comprehensive strategy. Timeline, communications, contingency plans." As we worked into the night, mapping possibilities and preparing responses, I felt a strange gratitude amid the pain of discovery. The truth about Olivia was devastating, but the truth about Daniel, his protection, his respect, his unwillingness to drive a wedge between sisters without incontrovertible evidence, reaffirmed everything I had believed about the man I married. By midnight, we had developed a framework for the next 2 weeks: careful communication patterns, strategic information sharing, and a controlled environment for whatever confrontation might occur. I would increase contact with Olivia, creating opportunities for her to reveal her plans while documenting every interaction. Daniel would maintain his usual schedule, but with enhanced awareness and preparation. Jason would coordinate our efforts, ensuring we maintained perspective when emotions threatened to overwhelm the process. As we prepared to leave, Daniel pulled me aside, his expression grave. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I thought I was protecting you, but I was making decisions about your family without including you. And I investigated you without trusting you enough to ask directly." Acknowledged. "We both need to do better." His relief was palpable as he gathered me into his arms. "We will. Starting now. Complete transparency. Whatever happens next." Walking home through Portland's quiet streets, hand in hand with my husband, I realized that discovering those letters had set in motion not an ending, but a beginning. The wooden box that had initially symbolized betrayal now represented something else entirely. The first step toward a difficult truth that would reshape my understanding of family, loyalty, and the stories we tell ourselves about the people we love. The next day, I scheduled coffee with Olivia, initiating the first phase of our plan. As I prepared to face my sister with new awareness of her intentions, I felt a strange calm replace the turmoil of recent weeks. Whatever she was planning, whatever confrontation awaited at our anniversary celebration, I would face it with clear eyes and complete information. The game of shadows and half-truths was ending. Now we would step into the light, where every manipulation would be visible, every pattern exposed. And in that revelation, painful as it might be, lay the possibility of something I hadn't anticipated when I first opened that wooden box. Not just knowledge of deception, but the freedom that comes from finally seeing the complete unfiltered truth. The atmosphere at Evergreen Brews hummed with morning conversation as I watched Olivia approach our table. She moved with practiced grace, turning heads as she always had, the effect careful rather than accidental. Today, she wore a blue silk blouse remarkably similar to one I'd purchased last month. Another data point for our documentation. "Sorry I'm late," she said, setting down her designer tote. "Client emergency." The same excuse she'd used twice this week. "No problem, I replied, pushing a latte toward her, prepared exactly as she liked it. "I got started on some haze event concepts while waiting." Olivia's eyes brightened with interest as she slid into her seat. "Perfect timing. I was hoping we could finalize the approach today. The client's getting anxious." I opened my portfolio, revealing carefully selected sample photographs, images from previous corporate events, all featuring strong compositional elements that emphasized connection, trust, and legacy. The Hayes Corporation's anniversary celebration would showcase their 50 years of business success, and the visual documentation needed to reflect that history while pointing toward their future. "These are extraordinary," Olivia said, examining each image with unusual intensity. But if her actions were witnessed by others, she couldn't rewrite the narrative, I finished. Photographer's instinct understanding the power of irrefutable visual evidence. A plan began forming in my mind, not one driven by revenge or hurt, but by the need for truth and resolution. If Olivia was indeed planning something for our anniversary, we could prepare a response that would bring this pattern into the light once and for all. "We need to understand exactly what she's planning," I said, professional focus replacing emotional reaction. "That means I need to get closer, not create distance." Daniel looked concerned. "Are you sure? Engaging more closely means exposing yourself to whatever manipulation she's attempting." "I'm sure," I replied, a calm certainty replacing the chaos of recent weeks. "I've spent my career capturing decisive moments, the split second when truth reveals itself. This is no different." Jason began clearing space on his evidence wall. "If we're going to do this, we need a comprehensive strategy. Timeline, communications, contingency plans." As we worked into the night, mapping possibilities and preparing responses, I felt a strange gratitude amid the pain of discovery. The truth about Olivia was devastating, but the truth about Daniel, his protection, his respect, his unwillingness to drive a wedge between sisters without incontrovertible evidence, reaffirmed everything I had believed about the man I married. By midnight, we had developed a framework for the next 2 weeks: careful communication patterns, strategic information sharing, and a controlled environment for whatever confrontation might occur. I would increase contact with Olivia, creating opportunities for her to reveal her plans while documenting every interaction. Daniel would maintain his usual schedule, but with enhanced awareness and preparation. Jason would coordinate our efforts, ensuring we maintained perspective when emotions threatened to overwhelm the process. As we prepared to leave, Daniel pulled me aside, his expression grave. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I thought I was protecting you, but I was making decisions about your family without including you. And I investigated you without trusting you enough to ask directly." Acknowledged. We both need to do better. His relief was palpable as he gathered me into his arms. "We will. Starting now. Complete transparency, whatever happens next." Walking home through Portland's quiet streets, hand in hand with my husband, I realized that discovering those letters had set in motion not an ending, but a beginning. The wooden box that had initially symbolized betrayal now represented something else entirely: The first step toward a difficult truth that would reshape my understanding of family, loyalty, and the stories we tell ourselves about the people we love. The next day, I scheduled coffee with Olivia, initiating the first phase of our plan. As I prepared to face my sister with new awareness of her intentions, I felt a strange calm replace the turmoil of recent weeks. Whatever she was planning, whatever confrontation awaited at our anniversary celebration, I would face it with clear eyes and complete information. The game of shadows and half-truths was ending. Now we would step into the light, where every manipulation would be visible, every pattern exposed. And in that revelation, painful as it might be, lay the possibility of something I hadn't anticipated when I first opened that wooden box. Not just knowledge of deception, but the freedom that comes from finally seeing the complete, unfiltered truth. The atmosphere at Evergreen Brews hummed with morning conversation as I watched Olivia approach our table. She moved with practiced grace, turning heads as she always had, the effect careful rather than accidental. Today, she wore a blue silk blouse remarkably similar to one I'd purchased last month. Another data point for our documentation. "Sorry I'm late," she said, setting down her designer tote. "Client emergency." The same excuse she'd used twice this week. "No problem," replied, pushing a latte toward her, prepared exactly as she liked it. I got started on some Haze event concepts while waiting. Olivia's eyes brightened with interest as she slid into her seat. Perfect timing. I was hoping we could finalize the approach today. The client's getting anxious. I opened my portfolio, revealing carefully selected sample photographs, images from previous corporate events, all featuring strong compositional elements that emphasized connection, trust, and legacy. The Hayes Corporation's anniversary celebration would showcase their 50 years of business success, and the visual documentation needed to reflect that history while pointing toward their future. "These are extraordinary," Olivia said, examining each image with unusual intensity, "especially this series, the way you've captured intimacy in a professional setting." "Especially this series, the way you've captured intimacy in a professional setting." Her finger lingered on a photograph of two business partners sharing a quiet moment amid a crowded reception. "It's about finding authentic moments in structured environments," I explained, watching her reaction carefully. "The real story often happens in the spaces between official events." Olivia nodded, a strange smile playing at her lips. "Speaking of authentic moments, how are the anniversary party plans coming along? 5th year is a big milestone." The casual mention of my anniversary, dropped into conversation as if merely making small talk, confirmed what Jason and Daniel had suspected. Olivia was indeed focused on that date. "Actually, we've scaled back significantly," I said, introducing the first piece of strategic misinformation we'd planned. "Daniel's been so swamped with the Riverside development that we're just doing a small dinner, nothing elaborate." Disappointment flickered across her features before she composed herself. "That doesn't sound like you. Your wedding was spectacular. I would have expected something similar for this milestone." "Marriage changes priorities," I replied with a practiced shrug. "The intimacy of celebration matters more than the spectacle now." Olivia studied me with newfound curiosity. "That's surprisingly traditional for you, Rachel. Everything okay with you two?" The opening I'd been waiting for appeared, a chance to plant the seeds of vulnerability she could exploit. "We're good," I said, hesitating just long enough to seem unconvincing. "Just busy. You know how it goes. Careers, obligations. Sometimes I wonder if we're growing in different directions." The calculation behind Olivia's sympathetic expression would have been invisible had I not been looking for it. That happens in every relationship. The important thing is having someone you can talk to, someone who truly understands you. "Like a sister," I suggested. "Exactly," she agreed, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "I'm always here for you, Rachel. Whatever you need." The conversation shifted to event logistics, but Olivia returned repeatedly to my relationship, each time offering support wrapped in subtle questions designed to expose vulnerabilities. Each comment, each probe was recorded in my hidden phone app, adding to our documentation. As we parted outside the coffee shop, she hugged me with unusual warmth. "Let's get together again before the Hayes event. Just sisters, no business talk. It's been too long since we really connected." "I'd like that," I replied, maintaining the performance while noticing how she lingered, watching me walk away. Back at Jason's apartment that evening, I played the recording for him and Daniel, noting the patterns of questioning and the strategic disclosures Olivia had made about her own life, always portraying herself as successful, yet available, fulfilled, yet understanding of relationship struggles. "She's positioning herself as both the confidant and the alternative," Jason observed, making notes on our timeline. "Classic triangulation strategy." Daniel listened with a pained expression. "This is so calculated. When did she become this person?" "She didn't become this person," I said quietly. "She's always been this way. I just made excuses for it, calling it sisterly competition or natural ambition." We spent the evening mapping out phase 2 of our strategy. The anniversary party that Olivia believed had been scaled back was actually proceeding as planned. An elegant celebration at the Emerald Room with 200 guests, including family, friends, and professional connections. The venue had been secured months ago, invitations sent discreetly to everyone except Olivia. "She'll discover the truth eventually," Daniel pointed out. "Someone will mention it, or she'll see preparations being made." "That's exactly what we want," I explained. "When she realizes she's been misled, she'll accelerate whatever she's planning. The urgency will make her less careful." Jason nodded. "And more likely to reveal the full extent of her intentions." The next phase played, out exactly as we anticipated. 3 days after our coffee meeting, Olivia called, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "I just ran into Victoria Chen," she said, naming a mutual friend from college. "She mentioned she's looking forward to your anniversary party at the Emerald Room next weekend. Funny, I thought you were just doing a small dinner." I allowed a heavy pause before responding. "I wasn't ready to discuss the real plans. Things with Daniel have been complicated." "Complicated how?" The barely concealed eagerness in her question was unmistakable. "It's nothing specific," I said vaguely. "Just a feeling that something's off. He's been distant, secretive about his schedule. I'm hoping the party will help us reconnect." Olivia's voice softened with manufactured concern. "Oh, Rachel, I'm so sorry you're going through this. Do you have any idea what might be happening?" "No," I lied, "but I'm trying not to overreact. Every marriage has phases, right?" "Of course," she agreed quickly. "Listen, I'd love to help with the party. It's what I do best, and you shouldn't have to manage everything alone, especially when you're worried about your relationship." The offer was predictable, a way to insert herself into the event planning, gaining access and information while positioning herself as the supportive sister. "That would be wonderful," I said, infusing my voice with relief. "Maybe you could help with the final arrangements? I'm overwhelmed with the Hayes project anyway." "Absolutely. Send me what you have so far, and I'll take it from there." After ending the call, I forwarded a carefully edited version of our event plans to Olivia, enough information to seem complete while excluding key elements that would be revealed only at the celebration itself. Most importantly, the guest list I sent omitted several people who would be crucial witnesses to whatever confrontation occurred. That evening, Daniel returned home visibly tense. "Olivia called me today," he said as soon as the door closed behind him. "She wanted to check in about the anniversary party, offered to help with last-minute details since you're so overwhelmed with work." "Let me guess," I replied. "She also mentioned I've been concerned about our relationship." He nodded grimly. She suggested we meet for lunch to discuss what might be bothering you, since you apparently haven't felt comfortable sharing your concerns directly with me. And what did you say? I told her I appreciate her concern, but that we're communicating. Fine. She didn't like that answer. I made notes of the interaction in our shared documentation file. She's moving faster now, creating urgency, trying to position herself between us as the mediator. The party is only 10 days away, Daniel observed. Whatever she's planning will need to happen soon if she wants to impact the celebration. The following week brought escalating attempts by Olivia to separate us. She called Daniel 3 more times with various pretexts, each conversation steering toward concerns about our marriage. She invited me to lunch twice, each time probing for details about specific challenges or disappointments in my relationship. Most tellingly, she began casually mentioning Daniel's schedule with surprising accuracy, noting when he had late meetings or suggesting we get together on evenings when she somehow knew he wouldn't be home. The implications were clear. She was tracking his movements, possibly through mutual acquaintances or more direct surveillance. 7 days before the anniversary party, I met Olivia at her downtown office, ostensibly to review final details for the Hayes event, but actually to advance our counter-strategy. I deliberately arrived looking tired, slightly disheveled, a visual suggestion of emotional strain. "Rachel, you look exhausted," she said, concern and satisfaction mingling in her expression. "Is everything all right?" "Just stressed about balancing." "Everything," I replied, allowing vulnerability to show. "The Hayes project, the anniversary party, and—" I trailed off deliberately. "And?" she prompted, leaning forward. "I found something in Daniel's office," I admitted, watching her reaction carefully. "A wooden box with letters inside. I haven't opened it yet, but it was hidden behind his architecture journals." Olivia's expression flickered, surprise, calculation, and what appeared to be momentary panic before settling into practiced sympathy. "That sounds concerning. Do you think you should look inside?" "I don't know," I said, rubbing my temples. Part of me wants to respect his privacy, but another part is terrified of what I might find. "Privacy is important," she agreed, though her tone suggested otherwise. "But so is transparency in a marriage. If he's hiding something that's affecting your relationship, don't you deserve to know?" The conversation that followed was a masterclass in manipulation, gentle encouragement to investigate wrapped in expressions of support, subtle suggestions of potential betrayal presented as concerned questions. By the end, Olivia had positioned herself as my emotional support system for whatever discovery might await. "Whatever you decide," she said as we parted, "I'm here for you. Day or night, just call." I nodded gratefully, then added the final piece of our setup. "The party preparations are becoming too much with everything else happening. Would you mind checking in with the Emerald Room about the final arrangements? The contact information is in the file I sent you." "Of course," she agreed immediately. "I'll handle everything." "You focus on taking care of yourself." As I walked away, I knew that Olivia would contact the venue immediately, using the opportunity to gather information and possibly make subtle changes to our celebration. What she didn't know was that I had already spoken with the management, alerting them to authorize only specific modifications from her, changes that would actually serve our purposes rather than hers. Back at Jason's apartment that evening, we finalized the most critical element of our strategy, the multimedia presentation that would serve as both timeline and revelation at the appropriate moment. Using my professional photography equipment, we created high-resolution scans of Olivia's letters, edited video documentation of her interactions with Daniel, and compiled a chronological record of her manipulation attempts. "The key is timing," Jason emphasized, reviewing our schedule. "If we reveal everything too early, she'll find a way to reframe the narrative. Too late, and whatever she's planning might already have caused damage." Daniel nodded, studying the sequence we'd arranged. We need to let her make the first move, then respond with the complete picture before she can control the situation. Exactly, I agreed. Based on her pattern, she's likely to create some kind of scene at the party, something designed to cast doubt on our relationship, while positioning herself as the supportive alternative. The technical aspects of our plan were straightforward. The Emerald Room's event space included built-in presentation screens and audio systems, all controlled from a discrete panel near the main entrance. Jason would manage the technical execution, waiting for my signal to activate our prepared materials at the critical moment. "What if she doesn't make a move at the party?" Daniel asked. "What if she's planning something more subtle or long-term?" I considered this possibility. Then we adjust. The goal isn't to create confrontation. It's to establish truth. If she chooses not to act during the celebration, we can address the situation more privately afterward. 3 days before the anniversary party, Olivia called with news about the venue arrangements. "Everything's set at the Emerald Room," she reported. "I made a few small adjustments to the seating chart to improve flow, and I've arranged for a special champagne toast before dinner." "That's thoughtful," I said, noting the additions to our documentation. "Thank you for handling everything." "Of course. What are sisters for?" "Oh, and I hope you don't mind. I asked them to seat me at the main table with you and Daniel. As family, I thought it made sense for me to be nearby for such an important celebration." The request was predictable, positioning herself prominently during whatever moment she had planned. "That's perfect," I agreed. "I'd want you close by anyway." The day before the anniversary party, final preparations accelerated on both sides. Olivia called twice with questions about timing and arrangements, each conversation including subtle probes about my emotional state and relationship with Daniel. I maintained the performance of mild concern and distraction, feeding her expectations of vulnerability. Meanwhile, Jason confirmed that all technical elements were in place at the Emerald Room. The presentation was loaded and tested, ready to activate at a moment's notice. Daniel reviewed our guest list, ensuring that key witnesses to Olivia's past behavior would be strategically positioned throughout the space. That evening, as Daniel and I prepared for bed, a strange calm settled between us. After weeks of documentation and strategic planning, tomorrow would bring resolution. Painful, but necessary. "Are you ready for this?" he asked quietly, taking my hand. "Not entirely," I admitted. Confronting Olivia means acknowledging that our relationship has never been what I pretended it was. That's harder than facing whatever she might do tomorrow. Daniel nodded, understanding the complex grief beneath my determination. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together. No more secrets, no more separate investigations. No more wooden boxes hidden in offices," I added with a small smile. The morning of our anniversary dawned clear and bright, Portland's skyline crisp, against an unusually blue October sky. As I prepared for the day, selecting the emerald green dress I'd chosen months ago, I felt the strange displacement of performing multiple roles simultaneously: the celebrating wife, the vigilant investigator, the sister preparing for painful confrontation. Daniel watched me from the doorway of our bedroom, his own expression reflecting similar complexity. "5 years," he said softly. "Despite everything, that's still worth celebrating." I crossed to him, straightening his tie with practiced familiarity. "The irony is that this situation has reminded me why I married you in the first place. The irony is that this situation has reminded me why I married you in the first place. Your integrity, your thoughtfulness. Even when you were trying to protect me from a painful truth, you were doing it for the right reasons." He kissed me, gently, a moment of genuine connection amid our careful preparations. "Let's go celebrate a milestone worth remembering." We arrived at the Emerald Room early to review final arrangements. The space had been transformed with elegant lighting, floral arrangements in cream and green, and subtle architectural elements that paid homage to Daniel's profession. At the center of the main table stood a custom crystal sculpture I'd commissioned months earlier. Two interlocking shapes representing our distinct identities joined in partnership. Jason was already there, dressed in a formal suit that concealed his dual role as both guest and technical coordinator. "Everything's ready," he confirmed quietly. Olivia called the venue twice this morning with last-minute adjustments. She's added a personal toast to the program right before dinner. I nodded, unsurprised. The toast would provide her public platform, the moment she'd been planning for. As guests began arriving, friends from college, professional colleagues, family members from both sides, I maintained the role of gracious hostess while monitoring the entrance for Olivia's arrival. Daniel circulated through the gathering, engaging naturally with our guests while staying within sight. At precisely 7:30, Olivia made her entrance. She wore a dress in deep burgundy that complemented my emerald green while ensuring she stood apart from other guests. Her hair was styled in an updo remarkably similar to my wedding day choice. Every detail of her appearance had been calculated, for maximum impact. "Rachel, darling," she greeted, embracing me with practiced warmth. "Everything looks stunning. You must be exhausted from all the planning." "I had help," I replied, returning her embrace with matching performance. "Thank you for managing the final details." Her gaze swept the room, assessing the gathering with quick efficiency. "Daniel looks handsome tonight. Where should I leave my gift? I've brought something special for both of you." The mention of a gift, something not discussed in our previous conversations, triggered immediate awareness. Whatever she had planned, likely centered around this unexpected addition to the evening. "The gift table is by the entrance," I directed her. "We'll be opening them after dinner." Olivia smiled, a hint of anticipation in her expression. "Some gifts shouldn't wait, but I'll follow your schedule." As she moved away to place her package among the others, I caught Jason's eye across the room, a silent signal that we should monitor the gift table. He nodded subtly, positioning himself nearby while maintaining conversation with another guest. The next hour proceeded according to plan. Guests mingled, enjoying cocktails and appetizers while celebrating our anniversary with warm congratulations. Daniel and I remained separated by design, creating natural opportunities for Olivia to approach each of us individually, which she did repeatedly, her conversations increasingly focused on creating moments of apparent discontent or misunderstanding. "Daniel mentioned you've been working unusually late this month," she commented during one such exchange. "The Hayes project must be quite demanding." "It is," I agreed, "but worthwhile. Still, 5 years in, one would hope work-life balance would be easier to maintain, especially on special occasions." The implication that Daniel had complained about my schedule was clear, though I knew no such conversation had occurred. Similar seeds were planted with Daniel, each interaction designed to create doubt or distance. I documented each attempt mentally, maintaining our timeline of manipulation while presenting the appearance of genuine celebration. At 8:30, dinner was announced. Guests moved toward assigned tables, Olivia taking her place beside me, at the main table as arranged. The moment approached when she would initiate whatever confrontation she had planned. As servers poured champagne for the first toast, Olivia leaned close, her voice just loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Have you opened that box from Daniel's office yet?" "Not yet," I replied, maintaining our established narrative. Tonight didn't seem like the right time to potentially discover something disturbing. She nodded sympathetically, though satisfaction flickered in her eyes. Sometimes we need to face difficult truths, even when the timing isn't convenient. The toast began with traditional acknowledgments from family and close friends. Each speaker celebrated different aspects of our relationship, Daniel's parents highlighting our commitment to community, my mother emphasizing our creative partnership, Megan, noting the balance we'd achieved between professional ambition and personal connection. Finally, the moment arrived for Olivia's addition to the program. She stood gracefully, champagne glass raised as all attention focused on her position at the main table. "For those who don't know me, I'm Rachel's sister," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "Which means I've had the privilege of watching this relationship from its very beginning 5 years ago." The practiced smile, the perfect posture, everything about her presentation projected sincerity and affection. Only those aware of our documentation would recognize the calculated performance. Rachel and Daniel have always seemed like the perfect couple, she continued, emphasizing the word "seemed" just enough to introduce doubt. Their wedding was a beautiful celebration of what everyone thought would be an ideal partnership. A subtle murmur passed through the gathering as guests noted the strange phrasing. Daniel reached for my hand under the table, a gesture of solidarity as Olivia's speech continued. But those of us closest to them know that perfection is often a carefully maintained illusion. Sometimes what looks like happiness from a distance conceals more complicated truths. The room had grown uncomfortably quiet, the celebration atmosphere shifting toward something tense and uncertain. "As Rachel's sister, I've been trusted with confidences that others haven't heard," Olivia stated, her expression communicating regret and reluctance. "I've listened when she couldn't speak to others about her concerns and disappointments." I felt Daniel's hand tighten around mine as Olivia placed her champagne glass on the table and reached into her evening bag, withdrawing a folded paper. "I wasn't planning to do this tonight," she said, the practiced spontaneity completely convincing. "But seeing you both pretending that everything is fine when I know otherwise feels dishonest. To you, and to everyone who cares about you." She unfolded the paper slowly, creating maximum dramatic tension. "Rachel, Daniel, I care too much about both of you to remain silent. The truth needs to be acknowledged before you can move forward, either together or apart." The moment had arrived, the confrontation we'd anticipated and prepared for. Olivia had positioned herself exactly as we expected, creating a public situation where her revelation would have maximum impact while appearing to come from concern rather than manipulation. I caught Jason's eye across the room, giving the subtle nod we'd arranged as our signal. As Olivia drew breath to continue her speech, I stood slowly, interrupting her carefully orchestrated moment. "Actually," I said calmly, "I think I should speak first." Olivia's expression flickered with momentary confusion. This wasn't the vulnerable, surprised reaction she had anticipated. "Before you continue," I added, "there's something everyone here should understand about the situation you're about to describe." I nodded toward Jason, who activated our prepared presentation. The lights dimmed slightly as the main screen illuminated with the first image, Olivia's initial letter to Daniel, enlarged for all to see. "These are copies of letters I found 6 months ago," I explained to the silent room. "Letters my sister wrote to my husband." The collective intake of breath from our guests was audible as I walked calmly toward the screen, taking control of the narrative Olivia had attempted to shape. "What most of you don't know is that this isn't an isolated incident," I continued, advancing to the next slide, a timeline showing documented patterns of Olivia's behavior. "My sister has spent years attempting to appropriate pieces of my life." I turned to face Olivia directly, watching as her confident expression dissolved into shock. She hadn't expected this reversal, hadn't anticipated that her own words would be revealed so publicly. "But the truly interesting part isn't the letters themselves," I said, my voice steady despite the emotion of the moment. "It's that Daniel never responded the way you wanted him to." The screen changed again, showing Daniel's documented rebuffs of Olivia's advances, the professional boundaries he maintained, the distance he created, the respect for our marriage he demonstrated repeatedly. "Daniel kept your letters," I explained. to the stunned gathering, not as mementos of an affair, but as evidence of a pattern he was trying to understand and ultimately protect me from. Olivia stood frozen, the paper in her hand seemingly forgotten as her carefully constructed moment collapsed around her. This wasn't the scene she had planned, her role suddenly shifting from concerned sister to exposed manipulator. "Is this true?" my mother asked, rising from her seat with a stricken expression. Olivia looked around the room, seeing faces that had shifted from celebration to shock, from warmth to confusion. The narrative she had controlled for so long was slipping beyond her grasp. "You don't understand," she whispered, looking not at our mother, but at me. "It was never about Daniel, not really." "I know," I replied, advancing to the final slide. A childhood photo of us standing before a gallery exhibition, my confident smile contrasting with her envious glance. "It was always about what you thought I had that you deserved." What happened next surprised everyone, myself included. Instead of fleeing in humiliation or launching into angry denials, Olivia simply sat down, her shoulders slumping in defeat. The paper she'd been holding, whatever evidence she'd planned to present, fell forgotten to the floor. "I couldn't stop," she said, her voice barely audible in the silent room. "Ever since Dad left and chose to send you, not me, that vintage camera for your 13th birthday. It was like he decided which daughter mattered." The revelation hung in the air, recontextualizing 2 decades of rivalry into something more complex and painful than simple jealousy. This unexpected vulnerability, this glimpse into the wounded core of our relationship, wasn't part of our carefully orchestrated exposure. I hadn't planned for this. My presentation was supposed to end with justice, not understanding. After a moment of weighted silence, I turned to our guests. "I think my sister and I need some privacy. Thank you all for coming, but I believe the celebration is over." Confused murmurs rippled through the gathering as people began collecting belongings, unsure how to respond to what they'd witnessed. Jason moved efficiently through the crowd, quietly explaining that we would contact everyone later, while Daniel spoke with the venue staff about ending the event early. As the room slowly emptied, my mother approached Olivia, her expression a complex mixture of disappointment and concern. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" she asked, placing a hesitant hand on Olivia's shoulder. Olivia didn't look up. "Would it have mattered? Rachel was always your focus too." Mother flinched as if struck, her hand falling away. "That's not true. I tried so hard to love you both equally." "Trying isn't the same as succeeding," Olivia replied, finally raising her eyes. "Everyone always saw Rachel first. I was just there." I stood frozen, witnessing an exchange that revealed fault lines in our family I'd either never noticed or deliberately ignored. The careful documentation, the strategic planning, none of it had prepared me for this raw, unfiltered pain. Daniel approached as my mother retreated to a corner, visibly shaken. "I should have told you from the beginning," he said quietly. "I was trying to protect you from exactly this pain." "I know," I replied, squeezing his hand. "We'll talk later." "Right. Now there's something more important." The Emerald Room had emptied except for our immediate family and Jason, who remained by the technical equipment, uncertain whether to leave. I motioned for him to go, mouthing, "Thank you," as he nodded and discreetly exited. I sat down across from Olivia, who hadn't moved or looked up since her confession. For the first time in our adult lives, the familiar script of competition and resentment had been abandoned, leaving us in uncharted territory. "Tell me about the camera," I said, quietly. "Tell me what it really meant to you." And as the staff cleared plates around us in the emptying restaurant, my sister finally shared her unfiltered truth. Not the version designed to manipulate or compete, but the raw, unvarnished story of a younger sister who had always felt overlooked. "You don't remember what happened before the camera arrived," she began, her voice steady despite the tears tracking silently down her face. "Dad called me first that day, asked me about my interests, what I was passionate about. I told him about the school newspaper, how I'd been selected as a junior reporter, how excited I was about telling stories." I shook my head slowly. "I never knew that." "Why would you? He called you an hour later and never mentioned speaking to me. When the package arrived with your name on it, containing this professional-grade camera, this perfect tool for someone interested in visual storytelling, I realized he hadn't been listening to me at all. He'd just been making obligatory conversation, before calling the daughter he actually wanted to connect with." The bitterness in her voice carried decades of accumulated pain, making me see our shared childhood through an entirely different lens. While I had treasured that camera as a symbol of our father's support, Olivia had viewed it as confirmation of her invisibility. "After that," she continued, "I started watching you more carefully. How people responded to you, the opportunities that seemed to fall into your lap. I thought if I could just figure out what made you special, I could become that too." Daniel, who had been listening silently, spoke gently. "But copying Rachel didn't make you feel any more seen, did it?" Olivia shook her head. "It just made the comparison more obvious. Even when I did exactly what she did, applied to the same schools, pursued the same internships, dated the same types of men, I was always the second version, the copy, not the original." My mother rejoined us, her earlier shock now contained behind a composed exterior. "I failed you," she said simply. "I didn't see what was happening. I thought your competitiveness was normal sibling dynamics, not this." "You saw what I showed you," Olivia replied. "The successful daughter, the one who didn't need special attention because she was doing fine on her own. It was easier than admitting I felt like a shadow." As painful revelations continued emerging, the carefully constructed narrative I'd created about our relationship disintegrated. The villain I'd documented so meticulously was also a victim of circumstance, of perception, and perhaps of my own obliviousness to her struggle. "The letters to Daniel," I said finally, steering us back to the immediate situation. "What were you hoping would happen?" Olivia looked at Daniel directly for the first time since my presentation. "Initially, just to feel chosen, to have someone who clearly valued Rachel choose me instead." She shook her head, a bitter smile forming. "It wasn't even about love or attraction. It was about winning the comparison, just once." "And later?" Daniel prompted gently. "Later, it became a project, a fantasy I couldn't let go. Each letter was another chapter in a story where I finally got to be the protagonist instead of the supporting character. I knew it wasn't real, but it felt more authentic than anything else in my life." The paper she'd dropped earlier lay forgotten on the floor. I picked it up, unfolding it carefully. It wasn't evidence against us as I'd expected, but a resignation letter. Olivia's formal withdrawal from the Hayes Corporation project, effective immediately. "You were planning to leave," I said, surprised by this unexpected turn. She nodded. "After making a scene at your anniversary party, creating doubt about your marriage, I was going to dramatically resign from our professional collaboration, citing ethical concerns about continuing to work with a couple in crisis. The ultimate positioning as both the righteous professional and the available alternative." The clinical way she described her planned manipulation was chilling, and yet threaded through it was an undeniable self-awareness, a recognition of her own destructive patterns. "Where would you have gone?" Mother asked. "Seattle," Olivia replied. "I've been offered a position with a major event planning firm there. The opportunity has been open for months, but I couldn't accept it while I was still." She trailed off, gesturing vaguely at the wreckage of her plans. "While you were still focused on becoming me," I finished for her. She nodded. the simple acknowledgement more powerful than any elaboration. As the night deepened around us, the restaurant staff respectfully maintained distance, understanding that something significant was unfolding. Daniel ordered coffee, and we continued talking, not with the strategic purpose of documentation and exposure, but with the halting honesty of people discovering truths long buried beneath performance and pretense. By midnight, exhaustion had replaced adrenaline. Nothing had been resolved, no magical reconciliation achieved, but something fundamental had shifted. The carefully maintained fiction of normal sisterhood had been abandoned, allowing the possibility, however remote, of building something authentic in its place. "I should go," Olivia said finally, gathering her belongings. "I've ruined enough of your anniversary." "Where will you stay tonight?" Mother asked with practical concern. "My apartment. I'll start packing tomorrow. The Seattle offer is still open if I want it." The mention of departure, of Olivia removing herself from our shared context, produced unexpectedly complex emotions. Part of me felt relief at the thought of distance from this painful situation. Another part recognized that geographic separation might prevent any genuine resolution. The bitterness in her voice carried decades of accumulated pain, making me see our shared childhood through an entirely different lens. While I had treasured that camera as a symbol of our father's support, Olivia had viewed it as confirmation of her invisibility. "After that," she continued, "I started watching you more carefully. How people responded to you, the opportunities that seemed to fall into your lap. I thought if I could just figure out what made you special, I could become that too." Daniel, who had been listening silently, spoke gently. "But copying Rachel didn't make you feel any more seen, did it?" Olivia shook her head. "It just made the comparison more obvious. Even when I did exactly what she did, applied to the same schools, pursued the same internships, dated the same types of men, I was always the second version. The copy, not the original." My mother rejoined us, her earlier shock now contained behind a composed exterior. "I failed you," she said simply. "I didn't see what was happening. I thought your competitiveness was normal sibling dynamics, not this." "You saw what I showed you," Olivia replied. "The successful daughter, the one who didn't need special attention because she was doing fine on her own. It was easier than admitting I felt like a shadow." As painful revelations continued emerging, the carefully constructed narrative I'd created about our relationship disintegrated. The villain I'd documented so meticulously was also a victim of circumstance, of perception, and perhaps of my own obliviousness to her struggle. "The letters to Daniel," I said finally, steering us back to the immediate situation. "What were you hoping would happen?" Olivia looked at Daniel directly for the first time since my presentation. "Initially, just to feel chosen, to have someone who clearly valued Rachel choose me instead." She shook her head, a bitter smile forming. "It wasn't even about love or attraction, it was about winning the comparison, just once." "And later?" Daniel prompted gently. "Later it became a project. A fantasy I couldn't let go. Each letter was another chapter in a story where I finally got to be the protagonist instead of the supporting character. I knew it wasn't real, but it felt more authentic than anything else in my life." The paper she'd dropped earlier lay forgotten on the floor. I picked it up, unfolding it carefully. It wasn't evidence against us as I'd expected, but a resignation letter. Olivia's formal withdrawal from the Hayes Corporation project, effective immediately. "You were planning to leave," I said, surprised by this unexpected turn. She nodded. "After making a scene at your anniversary party, creating doubt about your marriage, I was going to dramatically resign from our professional collaboration, citing ethical concerns about continuing to work with a couple in crisis. The ultimate positioning as both the righteous professional and the available alternative." The clinical way she described her planned manipulation was chilling, and yet threaded through it was an undeniable self-awareness, a recognition of her own destructive patterns. "Where would you have gone?" Mother asked. "Seattle," Olivia replied. "I've been offered a position with a major event planning firm there. The opportunity has been open for months, but I couldn't accept it while I was still—" She trailed off, gesturing vaguely at the wreckage of her plans. "While you were still focused on becoming me," I finished for her. She nodded, the simple acknowledgement more powerful than any elaboration. As the night deepened around us, restaurant staff respectfully maintained distance, understanding that something significant was unfolding. Daniel ordered coffee and we continued talking, not with the strategic purpose of documentation and exposure, but with the halting honesty of people discovering truths long buried beneath performance and pretense. By midnight, exhaustion had replaced adrenaline. Nothing had been resolved, no magical reconciliation achieved, but something fundamental had shifted. The carefully maintained fiction of normal sisterhood had been abandoned, allowing the possibility, however remote, of building something authentic in its place. "I should go," Olivia said finally, gathering her belongings. "I've ruined enough of your anniversary." "Where will you stay tonight?" Mother asked with practical concern. "My apartment. I'll start packing tomorrow. The Seattle offer is still open if I want it." The mention of departure, of Olivia removing herself from our shared context, produced unexpectedly complex emotions. Part of me felt relief at the thought of distance from this painful situation. Another part recognized that geographic separation might prevent any genuine resolution. "Don't make any decisions tonight," I said, surprising myself with the suggestion. "Everything looks different in the morning." Daniel nodded agreement. "Give yourself time to process. We all need that." Outside the Emerald Room, our small group separated with awkward goodbyes. None of the usual hugs or casual physical affection that normally marked family partings. Mother would drive Olivia home, while Daniel and I would return to our house. The celebration we'd planned now transformed into something entirely different. As we watched them drive away, Daniel wrapped his arm around my shoulders. "Not exactly the anniversary we expected." "No," I agreed, leaning into his support. "But maybe more honest than a perfect celebration would have been." Back home, we moved through familiar routines with strange detachment. Hanging up formal clothes, removing jewelry, washing away makeup. The physical reminders of the evening's intended celebration seemed to belong to different people, from a different timeline where the night had unfolded according to plan. Sitting on our bed, still in my slip, I felt the delayed impact of everything we'd experienced. "I don't know what to feel," I admitted as Daniel joined me. "Vindicated? Sad? Relieved? All of it at once?" "I think that's normal," he replied, taking my hand. "Nothing about this situation fits into simple categories." For months we documented her behavior, planning for this confrontation. But now that it's happened, I keep thinking about that camera, about Dad's call to her first, about all the times I might have contributed to her feeling invisible without even realizing it. Daniel considered this carefully, acknowledging, "Her pain doesn't invalidate the reality of her actions. Both things can be true simultaneously. She was hurt, and she responded to that hurt in manipulative, inappropriate ways." "I know," I said, "but understanding the source changes how I see everything that followed." We fell asleep, still talking. The neat resolution we'd anticipated replaced by complex questions without easy answers. Whatever happened next wouldn't follow any strategic plan or documentation protocol. We were in uncharted emotional territory. The following morning brought practical concerns to replace philosophical ones. Our phones contained dozens of messages from concerned guests, each requiring some response. The venue needed instructions about the gifts still waiting there. Normal life continued, despite the seismic shifts in our personal landscape. We should craft a simple statement, Daniel suggested over coffee. Something that acknowledges what happened without sharing private details. I nodded, grateful for his practical approach. Something that respects both the truth and Olivia's dignity. Together, we composed a brief message for friends and family who had witnessed the confrontation. Thank you for sharing our anniversary celebration, which took an unexpected turn. We're working through important family matters privately and appreciate your understanding and discretion during this time. We'll be in touch individually once things settle. The careful wording felt appropriate, honest without being exposing, acknowledging reality without inviting speculation. Daniel sent it from his account while I made coffee, the ordinary domestic action grounding me amid emotional turmoil. By mid-morning, Megan had called, her concern evident even through her careful restraint. I heard from Jason what happened after most of us left, she said. Are you okay? I'm processing, I replied truthfully. Nothing turned out the way we expected. Do you need anything? Company? Distance? Alcohol? Her offer made me smile despite everything. What I need is time to figure out what happens next. The easy part was exposing the pattern. The hard part is deciding what to do now that we all see it clearly. Whatever you decide, I'm here, she promised before ending the call. Shortly after noon, my mother called. Her voice carried the weight of a sleepless night. Olivia's packing, she said without preamble. She's accepted the Seattle position starting next week. The news wasn't surprising, but still landed with unexpected impact. That's probably best for everyone, I said, though uncertainty colored my tone. Is it? Mother asked quietly. Running away doesn't solve the underlying issues. It just changes their geography. What's the alternative? We can't just pretend last night didn't happen and continue as before. No, she agreed. But there might be something between pretend nothing happened and never speak again. Her words echoed in my mind after we disconnected. What would that middle ground look like? How could we acknowledge the truth of our damaged relationship without being permanently defined by it? Daniel found me in my home studio, surrounded by photographs from various phases of my career. I'd been searching through old family images, looking for visual evidence of what Olivia had described, moments where she might have appeared in the background while I stood centered in the frame. Find anything? He asked, settling beside me. Too much, I admitted, gesturing toward several prints I'd selected. Look at these, from holidays, school events, even casual gatherings. The pattern is obvious once you know to look for it. Each image told the same story, me in focus, often centered, engaged in activity or conversation. Olivia slightly peripheral, watching rather than participating, her expression containing varying degrees of the same emotion, a hunger for inclusion. I never saw it, I said, the weight of this blindness settling heavily. All these years I thought she was trying to take what was mine. I never considered she was trying to be seen the way I was. Daniel studied the photographs thoughtfully. Recognition doesn't come naturally to everyone. Some people have to fight for it. But fighting the way she did, through manipulation and deception, that can't be justified, right? No, he agreed. Her methods were wrong, but acknowledging why she chose them doesn't excuse the choices. It just helps us understand them. Understanding. The word kept returning in different contexts. Understanding as knowledge, as compassion, as the foundation for whatever might come next. That afternoon, I made a decision that wasn't part of any strategic plan or documentation, protocol. I drove to Olivia's apartment without calling ahead, without preparing what I would say. The carefully controlled approach that had defined our recent interactions needed to be abandoned if anything authentic was to emerge. When she opened the door, surprise registered briefly before her expression closed. She looked exhausted, hair pulled back carelessly, wearing clothes I'd never seen. simple jeans and a faded university sweatshirt without her usual attention to style. "Rachel," she acknowledged flatly, "I wasn't expecting you." Behind her, the apartment was in disarray, moving boxes stacked against walls, shelves partially emptied. The rapid dismantling of her Portland life was already well underway. "Can I come in?" I asked simply. She hesitated, then stepped aside without enthusiasm. "It's a mess." "I don't mind." Inside, I saw further evidence of hasty packing, clothing draped over furniture, books sorted into keep and donate piles, kitchen items wrapped in newspaper. The speed of her preparations suggested urgency beyond professional necessity. "Mom said you accepted the Seattle position," I said, settling on the only chair not covered with belongings. Olivia nodded, remaining standing. "I start Monday. They're arranging temporary housing until I find something permanent." "That's fast." "It's necessary," she replied with uncharacteristic directness. "Being here isn't sustainable anymore." The word choice was revealing, not just uncomfortable or painful, but fundamentally unsustainable, as if her existence in Portland, in proximity to me, required energy she no longer possessed. "I brought something," I said, opening my bag and removing a small photo album. "I found these this morning." Olivia took it reluctantly, as if expecting another form of evidence against her. Instead, she found childhood photographs she'd never seen, images from my perspective showing moments we'd shared. Unlike the formal portraits or staged holiday pictures that filled our mother's albums, these were casual snapshots I'd taken with my first simple camera, before Dad's professional gift had arrived. "I don't remember these," she said, turning pages slowly. "I was experimenting with photography even before the Nikon," I explained. "These were from my first point and shoot. Nothing special technically, but they show something important." The early images revealed a different dynamic than our later relationship. Olivia laughing unself-consciously, showing me her drawings, the two of us building elaborate blanket forts or staging backyard performances. There was connection, joy, even collaboration before the patterns of comparison and competition emerged. "We weren't always what we became," I said quietly. "Something changed, and neither of us knew how to change it back." Olivia closed the album, her composure faltering slightly. "Why did you bring these? What's the point now?" "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Maybe just to remember that there was something real before everything got complicated, that we weren't always defined by comparison." She returned the album without comment, but her expression had softened marginally. "I need to finish packing. The moving company comes tomorrow." I understood the dismissal but didn't immediately move to leave. The Hayes Corporation still needs both photography and event planning for their anniversary. I could recommend another planner or what? She asked when I hesitated. "Or we could still collaborate, just with more distance. You in Seattle, me here, professional boundaries, clear communication." Olivia's surprise was evident. "After everything that happened, you'd still work with me?" "Professionally, your work has always been exceptional," I acknowledged. "What happened between us personally doesn't change that fact." For the first time since I'd arrived, genuine emotion crossed her face. Confusion mingled with something like hope. "I don't understand why you'd offer that." "Because running away solves nothing," I said, echoing my mother's words. "Changing geography doesn't address the underlying issues. And you think a professional collaboration would?" "No," I admitted. "But it might be a starting point for something different. Not pretending nothing happened, but not defined exclusively by what went wrong either." Olivia considered this, her natural strategic thinking visibly engaged. "It would be complicated. People talk. After your anniversary party, there are already rumors." "Let them talk," I replied with unexpected conviction. "We know the truth, all of it, not just the parts that fit neatly into villain and victim. Categories. She didn't immediately agree, but didn't refuse either. Progress compared to the closed defensiveness of her initial greeting. I'll think about it. It wasn't much, but it was something. A small opening where before there had been only endings. I stood to leave, having accomplished what felt possible for one difficult conversation. At the door, Olivia stopped me with an unexpected question. The camera. Do you still have it? Dad's Nikon? Yes. It's in my studio. Do you still use it? I shook my head. It's film, not digital. I keep it for sentimental reasons, but my professional work requires different equipment now. She nodded thoughtfully. It's strange how objects take on meaning far beyond their practical use. That camera came to represent everything I thought I wasn't. Chosen, valued, seen. And everything I thought I was, I added, understanding. Dawning. Maybe we were both wrong about what it actually meant. This shared insight, small but significant, felt like the first genuinely mutual understanding we'd reached. Not one dictating to the other, not strategic positioning, just two people recognizing a common misconception. As I drove home, the encounter replayed in my mind. No dramatic reconciliation had occurred, no tearful embraces or profound revelations beyond what we'd already acknowledged. But something had shifted subtly, the rigid roles of manipulator and victim beginning to dissolve into something more nuanced and human. Daniel was waiting when I returned, concern evident in his expression. How did it go? Not great. Not terrible, I replied honestly. Somewhere in between. She's still leaving, but we talked about potentially collaborating on the Hayes project remotely. His surprise matched Olivia's. That's unexpected. Are you sure that's wise? I'm not sure of anything right now, I admitted. But complete separation feels like running away from something we need to face, even if facing it is painful and complicated. We spent the evening sorting through anniversary gifts that Jason had collected from the venue. Beautiful objects, and thoughtful messages now awkwardly disconnected from the celebration they were intended to commemorate. Each card offering congratulations on 5 wonderful years carried unintended irony given how the evening had actually unfolded. What do we do about the anniversary itself? Daniel asked as we organized the gifts. The actual date is still 3 days away. I hadn't considered this practical reality, that the party had preceded our actual wedding anniversary. The date still required acknowledgement, despite everything that had happened. Something private, I suggested. Just us. Maybe at Cannon Beach, where you proposed. A reset of sorts. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. A reminder of why we're together in the first place, before all the complications. The simplicity of this approach appealed to both of us. No elaborate celebration or public performance, just authentic connection away from the context that had recently defined our experience. That night, as we prepared for bed, Daniel raised a question that had clearly been troubling him. Do you regret how we handled everything? The documentation, the strategic planning, the public exposure? I considered this carefully. I regret not understanding sooner what was actually happening with Olivia. If I'd recognized the underlying dynamics years ago, maybe we could have addressed them before they became so destructive. That's not what I asked, he noted gently. I know, I acknowledged. The truth is, I don't regret the exposure itself. Olivia's behavior was manipulative and inappropriate. It needed to be addressed directly. But I wish we'd found a way to do it privately first, giving her an opportunity to explain her perspective before it became public. Daniel nodded. The public dimension changed everything, made it about shame and humiliation rather than understanding and boundaries. Exactly. We were so focused on documenting the pattern that we didn't consider the human impact of how we revealed it. This realization that our technically correct approach had lacked emotional intelligence settled between us as an Important lesson. Being right didn't always lead to the best outcome, especially when complex human relationships were involved. The following day brought an unexpected development. While reviewing project files for upcoming work, I received an email from Olivia with Hayes Corporation event in the subject line. Opening it revealed not a resignation, but a detailed proposal for how we might collaborate remotely on the project. Her handling client communications and overall event design from Seattle. Me managing the photography and visual elements from Portland. The proposal was meticulously professional, with clear delineation of responsibilities, communication protocols, and contingency plans. No personal content, no mention of our history or recent confrontation, just thoughtful, strategic planning for a successful project. I forwarded it to Daniel with a simple question. Progress? His reply came quickly. Maybe. Professional? Engagement with clear boundaries might be the safest territory for rebuilding trust. Trust. The word carried significant weight given recent events. Could genuine trust ever be re-established after such fundamental betrayal? Or were we simply creating a structured framework for cordial interaction without the emotional foundation trust required? I responded to Olivia's proposal with equal professionalism, accepting the outlined approach and suggesting a video conference the following week to align on specifics. Her acknowledgement came within minutes, brief, businesslike, without emotional content. This new dynamic, clinically professional where we had once been performatively intimate, felt strange but also clarifying. The pretense of normal sisterhood had been abandoned, allowing for interaction based on actual circumstances rather than maintained fiction. That evening, an unexpected package arrived via courier. Inside was a worn leather case containing a SAI, vintage Hasselblad medium format camera, an older professional model, meticulously maintained but showing signs of regular use. The accompanying note, handwritten on Olivia's personal stationery, contained just 4 lines. Found in Dad's storage. Unit after Mother sold the house. Apparently purchased for me the same year you received the Nikon. Never delivered. Some truths arrive too late to change the past, but might still inform the future. Oh. I stood in our living room, holding both note and camera, understanding immediately the significance of this discovery. Our father had indeed purchased gifts for both daughters, different tools reflecting different interests, mine in visual documentation, Olivia's in storytelling through images. But only one had been delivered, creating a narrative of preference and exclusion that shaped decades of relationship dynamics. Daniel examined the camera carefully. It's a storyteller's tool, more deliberate, more composed than a photojournalist's camera like your Nikon, perfect for someone interested in crafting visual narratives rather than capturing candid moments. The distinction wasn't coincidental. Our father had seen different strengths in his daughters, selected different tools to support those distinct talents. The tragedy wasn't in his perception, but in the incomplete delivery of his intention, creating a narrative of favoritism where balance had actually been planned. I called my mother immediately. Did you know about a second camera? A Hasselblad in Dad's storage? Her confusion was genuine. What? No. After the divorce, he maintained that unit privately. I never had access. When he died, the management company contacted me as next of kin, but I just had everything sent to a consignment dealer. I couldn't face sorting through it myself. Olivia must have contacted them directly, I realized, or tracked down the dealer. Why would she do that after all this time? Because understanding the past changes how we see the present, I replied, the importance of this discovery becoming clearer with each moment. This camera rewrites a foundational story we both believed about our relationship with Dad, and with each other. After ending the call with my mother, I sat with the Hasselblad, turning it carefully in my hands. The weight of misunderstanding it represented felt almost unbearable. 2 decades of rivalry and resentment built on a delivery failure, a misinterpreted gift, a story incomplete until now. I lifted my phone to call Olivia, then hesitated. This discovery deserved more than a hurried phone conversation. It required space for proper acknowledgement, for reconsideration of everything that had followed from our shared misunderstanding. Instead, I sent a simple text. Received the Hasselblad. We should talk when you're settled in Seattle. Safe travels tomorrow. Her reply came hours later, just before midnight. Some realities are easier to face with distance. We'll call when I'm ready. That night, I dreamed of cameras, my Nikon and Olivia's Hasselblad side by side, different tools for different visions, neither superior, just distinct. In the dream, we were photographing the same subject from different perspectives, creating complementary images rather than competing ones. I woke with the realization that this might be the healthiest metaphor for our relationship moving forward. Not one replaced by the other, not one dominant while the other faded to background, but parallel perspectives offering different values to the broader picture. While I couldn't undo the public confrontation at our anniversary party or erase the years of manipulation and resentment, this new understanding created possibility where before there had been only painful certainty. The wooden box of letters remained real, as did Olivia's inappropriate pursuit of Daniel. But the context for understanding those actions had expanded, becoming more complex and human than our documentation had acknowledged. The morning of our actual anniversary dawned clear and bright. By mutual agreement, Daniel and I had postponed our Cannon Beach trip until the following weekend, choosing instead to spend the day engaged in normal routines, work commitments, household tasks, simple togetherness without performance or expectation. As I prepared for a client meeting, my phone chimed with a notification from a shipping company. Olivia's belongings had been loaded and were en route to Seattle. The geographic separation we'd discussed was becoming physical reality, creating distance that might allow for clearer perspective on both sides. Daniel kissed me goodbye as he left for his office, the familiar gesture carrying renewed meaning after recent events. "Happy anniversary," he said simply. Not what we expected, but still ours. Still ours, I echoed, understanding the profound truth in those two words. Despite manipulation, despite deception, despite exposure and confrontation, what remained between us was authentic, strengthened rather than weakened by the challenges we'd faced together. As I drove to my studio, I passed the Emerald Room, site of our interrupted celebration. The venue appeared ordinary in daylight, giving no indication of the personal drama that had unfolded within its walls. Life continued around the spaces, where our private realities had collided so publicly. My phone rang as I parked outside Captured Moments photography. Olivia's name appeared on the screen, unexpected given her message about calling when settled in Seattle. I answered with cautious curiosity. "I'm at the airport," she said without preamble. "About to board. I just wanted to say something before I go." "I'm listening," I replied, remaining in my car rather than entering the studio. "I've spent my entire life trying to be you," she said, her voice steady despite the emotional content. "Copying your choices, your style, your interests. Even my pursuit of Daniel wasn't really about him. It was about having something you valued." I waited, sensing she needed to complete this thought without interruption. "I don't know who I actually am without that framework," she continued. "That's what Seattle represents, a chance to discover an identity that isn't defined by comparison to you." The honesty of this acknowledgement, unstrategic, unmanipulative, felt like the first wholly authentic communication we'd shared in years. "I think that's important," I said carefully, "for both of us. The Hayes Project collaboration is still on the table if you want it," she added. "But I'd understand if you'd rather make a cleaner break." I considered the question seriously, weighing professional opportunity against emotional complexity. Let's start there, with clear boundaries and professional focus. See if we can build something functional before attempting anything more complicated. One step at a time, she agreed. They're calling my flight. I should go. Olivia from across the gallery, noting how completely her external presentation had transformed. She moved through the space with confident purpose, engaging with guests about design concepts and artistic intentions without once glancing in my direction to check her performance or gauge my reaction. The habitual comparison that had characterized our interactions for decades had been replaced by genuine self-possession. When she approached to discuss a lighting adjustment, her professional demeanor carried none of the performative affection or calculated warmth that had characterized our previous interactions. Instead, there was straightforward competence and clear communication, both refreshing in their authenticity. "The Seattle Times reviewer just arrived," she said, checking something on her tablet. "Gallery 3 still needs some lighting adjustments for the projection sequence. The current setting is washing out the transitional images." "I'll handle it," I replied, our working dynamic now comfortable in its clarity. "Your event staff has the reception timing coordinated?" She nodded, consulting her schedule. "Everything's on schedule. The catering team is setting up in the West alcove with the formal remarks scheduled for 8:30. Oh, and Mom just texted. Her flight landed. She'll be here within the hour." Mother's planned attendance represented another milestone in our evolving family dynamic. Her initial reaction to the anniversary party confrontation had been profound shock, followed by complicated grief, not just for the exposure of Olivia's behavior, but for her own role in our dysfunctional relationship patterns. "I missed so many signs," she had admitted during a difficult conversation 6 months earlier, her hands wrapped tightly around a coffee cup as we sat in my Portland studio. I interpreted Olivia's competitiveness as ambition and drive, qualities I thought were positive. I never considered that she might be struggling with deeper issues of identity and belonging. "You saw what we showed you," I had acknowledged. I never talked about the patterns I noticed because they seemed like normal sibling rivalry, just more intense because of our personalities. Mother had shaken her head slowly. As the parent, I should have recognized the difference between healthy competition and destructive comparison. Instead, I think I reinforced the dynamic without realizing it, praising your accomplishments without recognizing how that affected Olivia's sense of herself. This growing awareness of how family dynamics had contributed to our situation created space for healing that extended beyond just Olivia and me. Mother had begun therapy herself, examining patterns from her own upbringing that had influenced her parenting style and relationship with each daughter. As I adjusted lighting in the third gallery space, carefully modifying the projections to create the precise emotional effect we'd designed, I reflected on how much had changed since finding that wooden box of letters. The documentation that had once seemed like irrefutable evidence of villainous behavior now represented just one chapter in a more complex story. Significant, but no longer defining. The Hayes Corporation exhibition had catalyzed something unexpected in both our professional and personal relationship. Working from different cities had created space for individual development while maintaining connection through shared purpose. The physical distance proved crucial, allowing Olivia to develop an identity separate from comparison while enabling me to see her more clearly without the distorting lens of proximity and history. Daniel joined me as I finished the lighting adjustments, his presence a steady constant throughout this evolving situation. "Megan just arrived with Jason," he said. "They're asking about dinner plans after the opening." "Let's include Olivia," I suggested after a moment's consideration. "It feels right to celebrate together, given how integral this project has been to everything that's happened since last year." He studied me carefully, his expression mixing concern with curiosity. "Are you sure? Things have been professional, but social interaction is different territory, especially with Megan and Jason there. That brings the confrontation back into focus." "I'm not sure of anything," I admitted, appreciating his directness. But continued separation feels artificial at this point. We've been collaborating for a year with good results. Maybe it's time to test whether we can share a meal without strategic positioning or emotional manipulation. When I extended the dinner invitation, Olivia's surprise was evident even through her professional composure. Her eyes widened slightly, and she paused before responding, a moment of genuine reaction rather than calculated response. "You want me to join? With Megan and Jason?" she asked, naming the two people who had helped orchestrate her public exposure. "They were both part of what happened," I acknowledged. "But they've also been part of what's changed since then. It might be good to experience that change together, in a neutral setting, with the exhibition's success as common ground." She considered this thoughtfully, weighing implications with visible care. "I'd like that," she said finally. "Thank you for suggesting it." The exhibition opening proceeded with smooth professionalism, our complementary skills creating an experience that impressed both corporate clients and arts community representatives. Throughout the evening, Olivia and I operated in parallel, not competing for attention or recognition, but each contributing distinct strengths to the shared project. Mother arrived midway through the event, elegant in a simple navy dress that reflected her own evolving identity following my father's death and subsequent personal reevaluation. She approached us with careful warmth, her relationships with both daughters having developed along separate healing paths over the past year. "This is extraordinary," she said, gesturing to the exhibition with genuine appreciation. "Both of you creating something beautiful together despite everything." "Not despite," Olivia corrected gently. "Because of. Understanding changes perspective." This simple insight, that our difficult history had created possibilities rather than just damage, resonated through the exhibition space. The painful confrontation at the Emerald Room had initiated necessary, if difficult, transformation for everyone involved. After the successful opening, our small group gathered at a nearby restaurant. Daniel and me, Olivia, Megan and Jason, Mother. The initial awkwardness dissolved gradually as conversation focused first on the exhibition's success, then expanded to include professional updates and casual personal news. "The interactive elements were particularly effective," Jason commented, his initial wariness giving way to genuine engagement. "The way visitors physically move through different perspectives created a powerful metaphor." "That was Olivia's concept," I acknowledged, giving credit where it was due. "My original photographs were much more conventionally presented until she suggested the layered screening approach." Watching Olivia interact with Megan, once the architect of our exposure strategy, I noticed the absence of defensiveness or performance in her demeanor. When Megan asked about her new Seattle life, Olivia's responses were thoughtfully measured, neither oversharing nor completely guarded, just authentically selective about personal disclosure. "The distance has been clarifying," she explained. "Being away from familiar contexts makes it easier to distinguish between habits and actual preferences. What I do because I've always done it versus what genuinely resonates." As the evening progressed, conversation flowed with increasing ease. Not the forced intimacy of performed closeness, but the measured exchange of people rediscovering each other under fundamentally changed circumstances. "I've been using the Hasselblad," Olivia mentioned during a lull in conversation, referencing the camera our father had purchased for her but never delivered, "for a personal project about identity and perspective. It's challenging after years of digital work, but there's something powerful about the deliberateness it requires. The way you must commit fully to each frame, thinking through composition and timing completely before capturing the image." "Dad would have appreciated that approach," I said quietly. "He always valued thoughtful composition over quick capture, the difference between making an image versus taking one." Mother looked between us, witnessing this acknowledgement of shared heritage without the competitive edge that had previously defined such moments. He would have been proud of this exhibition, she offered. Of both of you, in different ways. Your distinct strengths, complementing rather than competing. The evening continued with measured openness, not forced intimacy or performed affection, but authentic exchange between people who shared significant history and were learning to create healthier future interactions. As we prepared to leave, Olivia hesitated, then addressed me directly. I've been offered a position with an international event firm. It would mean dividing time between Seattle and London for the first year, then potentially relocating permanently. That sounds like an incredible opportunity, I replied, genuinely pleased for her professional recognition. Their global presence would provide amazing creative possibilities. It would, she agreed, but it would change our working arrangement for any future collaborations. I'd be unavailable for in-person oversight during European assignments. The acknowledgement that she was considering future professional partnership after the Hayes project indicated significant evolution from where we'd started, from manipulation and competition to respectful collaboration that benefited from our different strengths. We'll adapt, I assured her. Distance hasn't been an obstacle so far. Technology makes collaboration possible across continents, not just cities. She nodded, a small smile acknowledging the truth in this observation. The physical separation that had initially seemed like escape had ultimately facilitated connection, based on healthier terms. 2 years after discovering the wooden box of letters, I found myself helping Olivia select photographs for her Identity Project exhibition in London. The request for my professional input had come without manipulation or hidden agenda. Simply one artist seeking feedback from another with relevant expertise. Our video consultation session stretched longer than scheduled as we engaged in detailed discussion of compositional elements, thematic coherence, and narrative progression through the exhibition space. The images she shared revealed profound transformation in both technical skill and conceptual depth. Using the Hasselblad our father had originally intended for her, Olivia had created a series exploring the distinction between reflection and replication, mirrors versus copies, inspiration versus imitation. One particularly striking sequence showed a subject approaching a mirror, initially attempting to perfect their appearance to match an idealized image, then gradually recognizing and accepting the distinctive elements that made them unique. These are extraordinary, I said, studying a particularly powerful triptych showing fragmented reflections gradually resolving into a coherent whole. Especially this sequence showing the disintegration and reassembly of self-image. The technical execution supports the conceptual foundation perfectly. I couldn't have created them without everything that happened, she acknowledged, her expression thoughtful on my screen. The separation forced me to discover who I am without reference to you or anyone else. It was painful, but necessary. This honest assessment, neither minimizing past behavior nor dwelling in perpetual shame, characterized our evolved communication. The manipulation and deception documented in Daniel's wooden box remained factual history, but no longer functioned as the defining narrative of our relationship. When Olivia invited us to the London opening 6 months later, the decision to attend felt natural rather than forced. Daniel and I made the trip an extended vacation, combining professional networking with personal exploration of a city we both loved, but had never properly experienced together. The gallery in East London occupied a converted warehouse space, its industrial elements preserved while accommodating the technical requirements of contemporary exhibition. Olivia had transformed the environment with characteristic attention to detail, lighting designed to enhance emotional impact, pathways that guided visitors through a carefully sequenced narrative, interactive elements that invited personal engagement with abstract concepts. The central installation featured a corridor of mirrors arranged at varying angles, creating multiplied reflections that gradually shifted as viewers moved through the space. Each visitor experienced a unique visual journey based on their path and pace, a powerful metaphor for the subjective nature of identity formation. The technical execution is impressive, a British curator commented as we observed visitors, engaging with the installation. But what elevates it is the emotional authenticity informing the concept. This comes from lived experience, not just intellectual exploration. Watching Olivia move confidently through the crowd, articulating her creative vision, receiving praise from international critics, connecting with fellow artists, I recognized how completely she had transformed from character in someone else's story to author of her own. "Your sister's work is remarkable," a gallery owner observed, unaware of our complicated history. The exploration of authentic self versus performed identity feels particularly relevant in our digital age, where so many construct themselves for external validation. "Yes," I agreed. She brings unique perspective to questions of how we construct ourselves in relation to others. Later that evening, as we celebrated the successful opening at a small restaurant near the Thames, Olivia raised her glass in a simple toast. "To Parallel Visions," she said, echoing the title of our first collaborative exhibition. "And to the freedom of creating your own story instead of trying to live in someone else's." Daniel and I joined the toast, appreciating the journey encapsulated in that simple phrasing. The wooden box that had once contained evidence of manipulation now represented a turning point rather than a conclusion. The moment when uncomfortable truth created possibility for authentic transformation. 3 years after the confrontation, at the Emerald Room, professional collaboration had expanded into cautious personal reconnection. When Olivia announced her engagement to William, a British architectural historian she'd met through her international work, the invitation to her intimate London wedding arrived with a handwritten note acknowledging our complex history. "I'd understand if you preferred not to attend," she wrote. "Our history is complicated, and celebrating a marriage might trigger difficult memories given how our last shared celebration unfolded. But I've learned the importance of authentic connection, and I'd value your presence if you feel comfortable sharing this milestone." The thoughtfulness of this approach, acknowledging reality while creating space for autonomous choice, reflected how profoundly our interaction patterns had evolved. No manipulation, no strategic positioning, just honest communication with respect for boundaries and awareness of potential emotional complexity. Daniel and I decided to attend, recognizing the significance of supporting this new chapter in Olivia's life. The ceremony in a historic Chelsea venue reflected her distinct aesthetic. Architectural elegance combined with thoughtful detail, nothing borrowed or imitative, but clearly expressing her personal vision. The small gathering included primarily London colleagues and new friends, with only Mother joining us from the family side. The intimacy of the celebration created natural opportunities for meaningful interaction rather than performative family dynamics. William, a thoughtful man, with quiet confidence and genuine intellectual curiosity, complemented Olivia perfectly. Their relationship had developed entirely outside the context of our complicated history, providing her with partnership based on who she had become rather than who she had been. "He knows everything," she confided during a private moment at the reception. "About the letters, the confrontation, all of it. I couldn't build something authentic while hiding significant parts of my history." "How did he respond?" I asked, genuinely curious about how someone outside our family system would perceive the situation. "With compassion," she replied, "not excusing the behavior, but understanding the context and valuing the growth that followed. He sees me as I am now, while acknowledging the path that brought me here." This integration of past and present, neither denying history nor being limited by it, characterized Olivia's new life. Her professional success, creative development, and personal relationships all reflected someone who had done the difficult work of authentic transformation. During the celebration, I found myself standing beside my sister as she received congratulations, from international friends and colleagues. Many knew nothing of our history, seeing only two women with similar features but different styles, connected by blood but distinct in presence. "Thank you for coming," Olivia said quietly. "It means more than I can adequately express." "I wouldn't have missed it," I replied truthfully. "You've created something beautiful, not just today, but in your life." She smiled, the expression genuine rather than calculated. I had to lose myself completely before I could find who I actually am. As painful as that process was, I'm grateful for where it led. This acknowledgement, that difficult truths had ultimately facilitated positive transformation, became the foundation for continued healing. Not erasure of past harm or performance of perfect reconciliation, but gradual building of something authentic from the rubble of what had been destroyed. 4 years after the confrontation, Olivia's professional success had expanded significantly. Her international firm had promoted her to creative director for European operations, a position that recognized both her technical expertise in event design and her emerging artistic vision. Meanwhile, my photography studio had evolved to include therapeutic applications, using visual documentation to help people process significant life transitions. These parallel professional paths occasionally intersected through collaborative projects, corporate events with artistic dimensions, documentary work with experiential elements. Each intersection reinforced the value of our distinct approaches while creating opportunities for mutual growth. During one such collaboration, a corporate rebranding that required both visual documentation and experiential design, Olivia mentioned a new project that surprised me. "I've been working with a publisher," she said during our planning call, "developing a book about identity formation and authentic self-development." "That's exciting," I replied. "Based on your exhibition work?" "Partly," she acknowledged, "but also drawing from personal experience. It started as therapeutic journaling after everything happened with us, evolved into more structured reflection during my transition to Seattle, and has gradually become something I think might help others struggling with similar patterns." The directness with which she referenced our painful history, neither avoiding it nor dwelling in it, demonstrated how thoroughly she had integrated those experiences into her understanding without being defined by them. "Will it include—" I hesitated, unsure how to reference the letters, the confrontation, the public exposure. "Yes," she confirmed directly, though with names and specific details changed to protect privacy. "But the core experiences, the pattern of imitation rather than authentic development, the manipulation arising from insecurity, the public confrontation that forced change, those elements are central to the narrative arc." What struck me most about this approach wasn't just her willingness to acknowledge uncomfortable truths, but her transformation of painful experience into potentially valuable insight for others, turning private shame into public contribution. "The publisher believes it addresses something many people experience, though perhaps not as dramatically as we did," she continued. "The fundamental question of how we develop authentic identity when we're constantly comparing ourselves to others resonates widely in contemporary culture. This perspective, seeing our specific situation as an extreme version of common human struggles, created meaningful context for what might otherwise remain simply painful personal history. 5 years after discovering the wooden box of letters, I found myself preparing to welcome Olivia and William to Portland. Their first visit since relocating permanently to London represented another step in our ongoing navigation of complex family dynamics. I moved through our home with careful attention, preparing the guest room that had once been my home studio before I moved operations downtown. Fresh linens, flowers from our garden, space cleared in the closet for their belongings, practical preparations that also served as meditation on how much had changed since Olivia had last visited. "Are you nervous?" Daniel asked, observing my methodical arrangements. "Not nervous exactly," I replied, considering the question. "Just aware that this is uncharted territory. Having Olivia in our home, not as the person she was 5 years ago, but as who she's become since then. And meeting William properly, beyond the brief interactions at their wedding. The doorbell rang precisely at the arranged time, Olivia's punctuality reflecting her continued precision in professional and personal habits. When I opened the door, the moment carried familiar elements while remaining distinctly new. My sister's. Features recognizable, but her presence fundamentally transformed. "Welcome to Portland," I said simply, stepping aside to invite them in. "It feels strange returning as a visitor," she admitted, as William carried their luggage inside. "But good strange. Clarifying." Over the following days, we experienced a new kind of interaction. Neither the performative closeness of our earlier adult relationship, nor the strategic distance of early healing, but something more authentic than either previous mode. Shared meals, professional discussions, city explorations with William, occasional reminiscences about childhood moments, all conducted without manipulation or defensive positioning. William's presence added valuable dimension to our interactions. His relationship with Olivia had developed entirely outside the context of our complicated history, providing her with partnership based on who she had become rather than who she had been. Watching their natural connection, the easy communication, the genuine respect, the comfortable affection, I saw further evidence of how completely she had transformed from the person who had written those letters to Daniel. I saw further evidence of how completely she had transformed from the person who had written those letters to Daniel. One evening, while the men were engaged in detailed conversation about architectural preservation, Daniel's professional interest, aligning with William's academic expertise, Olivia and I found ourselves alone on the back deck, Portland's skyline glittering beyond the garden. "I brought something to show you," she said, retrieving her tablet from inside. "My publisher sent the final cover design yesterday." The screen illuminated with a striking image, a book cover featuring one of her Hasselblad photographs above. The title, "Borrowed Identity, Breaking the Cycle of Comparison and Finding Authentic Self." "You wrote a book," I said, genuinely impressed by the professional design and concept. She nodded. "It evolved more quickly than expected. The publisher believes it addresses something many people struggle with, particularly in the age of social media where constant comparison is almost unavoidable." "Does it include?" I hesitated, unsure how to reference our painful history. "Yes," she acknowledged directly. "The letters, the confrontation, everything. But in context, as part of a larger narrative about how we sometimes lose ourselves in attempting to become someone else. I've changed names and specific details, but the core experiences remain." The directness of this approach, neither hiding difficult truths nor exploiting them for dramatic effect, reflected how thoroughly Olivia had integrated the painful lessons of our shared history. "I'd like you to read it before publication," she continued. "Not for approval, the manuscript is final, but so you're prepared for what's being shared, and to include your perspective in the afterword if you're willing. The publisher thinks having both voices would strengthen the narrative." This invitation to contribute my viewpoint, to stand alongside rather than in opposition, represented the most profound evolution in our relationship, from competition to complementary perspective, from rivalry to mutual respect for distinct experiences. "I'd be honored," I said simply. Later that night, after our guests had retired to the spare room, Daniel and I sat in our familiar positions on the living room couch, processing the day's interactions with the ease of long partnership. "It's remarkable," he observed quietly, "watching you both navigate this new territory without the old patterns emerging. There's history acknowledged without being trapped in it." "It's still complex," I acknowledged. "There are moments when echoes of the past surface, a particular phrase or gesture that triggers memory, but they're just echoes now, not defining elements." He nodded thoughtfully. "The wooden box is still in my office closet. I've wondered occasionally whether we should dispose of the letters, now that they're no longer evidence or protection." The mention of those letters, Painful documentation of manipulation and inappropriate pursuit brought surprising clarity. I think they should stay where they are, I decided. Not as active influence in our lives, but as archived history. Removing them doesn't change what happened, and erasing history often means losing its lessons as well. True, Daniel agreed, and acknowledging reality has proven more healing than denying it. This simple insight captured the essence of our 5-year journey since the discovery. Not perfect reconciliation or complete forgiveness, but honest acknowledgement, creating space for authentic transformation. The following morning, as Olivia and I prepared breakfast while the men took an architectural walking tour, she mentioned the wooden box unprompted. "I've often thought about those letters," she said, arranging fruit on a serving plate with characteristic precision. How something written with manipulative intent became the catalyst for necessary change. There's profound irony in that. "They forced truth into the open," I acknowledged, slicing bread for toast. Painful truth, but essential for any possibility of healing. She nodded, her movements deliberate and thoughtful. "In my book, I describe them as both my greatest shame and my ultimate liberation. Without their discovery, I might have continued indefinitely, losing myself more completely with each attempt to become someone else." The wooden box that had once contained evidence of betrayal had ultimately facilitated something neither of us could have imagined when I first discovered it. Not just exposure of manipulation, but transformation of underlying patterns that had damaged both our lives in different ways. As we carried breakfast to the sunlit dining table, the parallel paths of our lives seemed momentarily visible, distinct, trajectories sharing origin points, but developing according to individual vision rather than competitive comparison. "To authentic selves," Olivia suggested, raising her coffee cup in casual toast. "And to the difficult truths that help us find them," I added, completing the acknowledgement of our complex, ongoing journey. The wooden box remained in Daniel's office closet. The Hasselblad continued capturing Olivia's distinct visual perspective, and the pain of our shared history evolved gradually from active wound to meaningful scar. Not forgotten, but incorporated into something stronger and more authentic than what had existed before. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.